Welcome to Table Talk, the place for deep conversations in the Geekverse. And trust me, when we tear into a subject, we go deep. I'm Heath, and I'll be your host. Each episode, I'll be talking with one or more creators, authors, illustrators, publishers, or other movers and shakers in games, TV, books, movies, or other areas of the Geekverse. Regular guests include Douglas A. Burton, the author of Faraway Bird, a multi-award-winning historical fiction novel of the Byzantine Empress Theodora. He's also the author of The Heroine's Labyrinth, an alternative story structure to the hero's journey that often occurs in stories with feminine heroes. That structural framework frequently comes up in our analysis of story. Brianna De Silva, she's the director and co-writer of The Cultists, a Lovecraftian comedy mockumentary-style web show here on YouTube, and the author of The City of Reckoning, an epic fantasy novel of political intrigue, the ethics of war, and young love. Cameron Pasha is a screenwriter, director, novelist, and was a writer and producer on the series Kings, a producer on NBC's Bionic Woman, and a co-producer and writer for Sleeper Cell. He's also written for the CW series Nikita and Roswell, New Mexico. He's been breaking news from inside Lucasfilm, Disney, and Hollywood. His analysis and commentary have become very popular on YouTube. We regularly meet to discuss and analyze stories, and when we do, we dive into graduate-level seminars on story structure and writing. Come on in and let's go deep. And when I say we're going deep, I mean you'd better bring your hard suit. Other guests have included Lou Anders, the author of the Thrones and Bones fantasy novels Once Upon a Unicorn, the creator and publisher of the Norengard RPG, and the author of Star Wars: A Pirate's Price, the book that explains why the Millennium Falcon is on the planet Batu at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Mark Tassin, the creator of the World of Ataltis, head of Mechanical Muse, former director of the Gen Con Writers Symposium, and the head developer of the new Cool Name RPG. Let's see, who else?
Bond. James Bond.
Well, not James Bond. Not yet. Maybe soon, though. But I have interviewed Jamie Stegmaier, the founder of Stonemaier Games, crowdfunder extraordinaire, and publisher of many hit board games like Scythe and Wingspan. Brian Colin, sculptor of the world of Revelo Monster Busts, and the creator of the vast, grim, dark horror RPG. Ajit George, the Dungeons & Dragons author. We talked about game writing, education, and his contribution to Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft, and the development of the Journeys to the Radiant Citadel.
I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, the commander of the legions of Asgard, the rightful heir to the throne, and the goddess of death.
Well, actually, that interview got rather spicy, so I think I'd better just keep that one to myself. Kate Wilson, a YouTuber, actress, host, and prolific geek guru who's now working to make a new show dedicated to the world of tabletop gaming a reality. So buckle up and get ready for a wild ride, because it's time to explore the worlds of tabletop gaming, sci-fi, fantasy, and all of geekdom through the eyes of those who are making things happen.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger, ready to move out.
It's time for Table Talk. Hey, good morning, or good evening, everyone. I got confused as to what show I'm doing here. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Table Talk. Welcome to my house. Welcome to the office. Welcome to the show. It is so great to have you. We are going to be talking about Arcane again tonight. And yes, we've already done a show on Arcane, but because everyone was talking about it so much and said, you've got to watch Arcane, Heath, and so I did. Then we did the show with Brianna and Doug. But it is so deep. It is so amazing. I completely agree with everyone. After you all got me to watch it, I completely agree that it was amazing. There is so much more to talk about. And so we needed to do another episode on Arcane, this time with new people, with new perspectives on the show. So we're going to bring two community members on here in just a moment. But before I do, I want to say, if you are watching elsewhere, we do have a dedicated Table Talk channel. Of course, we're streaming on Facebook and on X. Maybe you might call it Twitter, but I call it X, whatever. We're streaming there. If you're watching in different places, the show is now on a dedicated YouTube channel here on the Table Talk YouTube channel. And if you're watching elsewhere, it would really help us if you could to watch it over here on the dedicated Table Talk YouTube channel. That'll help us get watch hours over here on this particular channel as we try to establish Table Talk as its own brand. That would be huge. And then also, the cultists, I am working, especially over the next 3 weeks, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks, that kind of thing. I'm going to be majorly focused on launching the cultists, which is my show. Let's say the cultists on YouTube. That is about modern day Lovecraftian cultists just trying to worship Cthulhu in a world full of people who don't understand. It's a mockumentary style show. We've shot 2 seasons of 10 episodes each. Each episode's about 6 to 8 minutes. And if you see that link, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that link and subscribe to the channel, because I've been working on a few other things, getting our tabletop coffee shop ready over the past about 3 days. I'm going to get that going, and then it's all going to be about the cultists and seeing if we can launch a show here on YouTube. And if we can, that would be fantastic, and I would love to have you for it. All right, so that's what's going on. The guests today for the panel for talking about Arcane are 2 community favorites, James Bacon and Sable Phoenix. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you for the preamble. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, good morning.
I get on autopilot.
Yeah.
No, I get it. I totally get it.
James, James Bacon, do you want to tell everybody who you are and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm an internet nobody. My little byline says internet jerk and general ne'er-do-well. You generally can just find me in the Discord and the chat here in the Geekverse. I don't really have a large online presence. I am a former professional editor, so I contribute in what ways I'm able in that regard. But that's really it. It's just a guy, just a chat guy, just like you guys.
Just like a guy.
Yeah, just like a guy. James Bacon, 2024. I'm just like a guy.
Yeah. So we have another guy.
Just a guy. Yeah.
We have another guy here. We got Sable Phoenix, who's another guy.
Yep.
Sable, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. If you're part of the Geekverse, then you probably know who I am, because I've been a regular ever since a year ago with the whole OGL debacle, turning me onto the presence of your channel in the first place when you're doing stuff like interviewing Ryan Dancy and what have you. So I, just like James, am an internet nobody by choice. I don't do social media, and so I have no real claim to fame. I think my biggest contribution on this, outside of my long-time interest in story and archetypes and mythology and what have you, which is another reason I stick around and watch all your streams all the time, Heath, is because you're focused on those kinds of things as well. But in this case, I'm also I can also bring some technical perspective, because I'm an animator too. I went to the Art Institute of California to get a bachelor's in media arts and animation. I studied 3D animation, which includes studying all kinds of animation, 2D, 3D, what have you. So when I started watching Arcane, I was like, wow, what they're doing here is really cool. So I feel like that's going to be my main contribution on this.
Well, I didn't know that, Sable. I didn't know that until a few minutes ago when you mentioned that, just before coming on the stream here, that you had studied animation. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. So that's It's really interesting. So is that what you work in now?
No. I went to Art Institute. I studied it. I did some work for various things. I did some work for some game companies. I did some freelance animation for the Church of Scientology, of all things.
Really?
That was an interesting experience, let me tell you. And I haven't done anything for remuneration for a long time now, involved with animation. But I've always been an artist. Like, I was drawing as soon as I could hold a pencil. So it's something that's I went and studied animation because I love it, and what really got me to what got me to kind of bite the bullet and go to college for it was Pixar and their movies, and they were just kind of starting out when I went, and also what Blizzard was doing with their cinematics at the time. Especially, I mean, looking at Blizzard cinematics now, they look like film just about, but even back then they were like at the top of the game when it came to I went to Art Institute not too long after Warcraft 3 came out, and what really got me was like, I want to do that, was the cinematic of Arthas coming home from Northrend, and him walking through the gates and all the rose petals coming down and him catching one and bruising it and dropping it, like, and then I was like, yeah, I want to do that. So,
all right. Well, do you want to start? I know you had commentary then specifically on the animation of Arcane.
Yes.
You sound perfectly situated to talk about that. Do you want to start off tonight's conversation by talking about
I can do
what
that.
they did from an animation perspective?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. All right. Take it away.
Well, I know that when no, Lord Xenu has not blessed me. I don't believe in Lord Xenu. I was not transported here on a DC-7 or whatever. But as far as the animation in Arcane goes, I was struck by the art style as soon as I started watching it. Of course, that opening is up levels of a cold open, right? But what really got me, the moment that I knew I'd fallen in love with the show, was when Vi starts chewing Milo out for always ragging on Powder, and it says that the scene where she's like, your problem is never knowing when to shut up, but I'm going to help you with that. You see this look on my face? This will always mean that it's time to shut up. And he tries to start saying something, and she just points, and then he starts again, and she points with both of her fingers, and is like, holds her hands out like, did you not just hear what I said? And I just burst out laughing, and I knew at that minute I was a fan of the show. And even then I wasn't prepared. I mean, who could be? For what was going to happen in just 2 more episodes, to say nothing of everything after that. But that was the moment where I also realized that I was like, this has got to be keyframed. And what I mean by keyframed is that it's basically animated by hand. You can have keyframed animation, or you can have mocap, motion capture animation, are the 2 main ways to do it. And most 3D animation is mocapped nowadays, but mocap is not necessarily less work. Like you have to put everybody in suits, and they have to wear all the trackers, and have some way for the cameras to figure out what kind of reference points that you're going to include on the models to rig it, and then you have to go in and you have to clean up the mocap data because it's full of jitters and all sorts of weird motions, because you can't perfectly, you're trying to capture motion visually, and it's never perfect. So it's actually a ton of work. And when you're doing something that's purely animation like this, a lot of the times it doesn't look as good. Because one of the strengths of animation is being able to, as an example, especially like in the fight scenes, the animation feels like realer than real, is what I like to call it, because you can over exaggerate the motions. You can cut out frames to speed up motions. You can make them look and feel like they hit harder. Fortiche, the studio that animated Arcane for Riot, is are masters of the principles of animation. And if you're masters of the principles of animation, you can use it to make, they're able to use the medium to all its strengths. Even though it feels, even though everything is, like the cinematography is very live action adjacent, I guess you could say. It imitates live action in a lot of ways. But the things that they do with the animation, they wouldn't be able to do with live action. And so I could probably, I'll touch on some of the stuff. I'll keep it fairly brief, or as brief as I can, because we could talk about the animation for.
But they do things like that in terms in live action as well. When you're talking about making people hit harder or faster,
Yeah.
I've heard people talk about like dropping frames with
Exactly.
punches to make it a punch arrive just before you're expecting a punch to do. So people, so that kind of technique is sometimes used with live action too.
Yeah, and that's that is one tool you can use with animation. But one of the things you'll notice if you go back and watch the fight scenes, or really anything that has any kind of high action to it, frame by frame, you'll see plenty of times where like a character will, like say Vi is swinging at Savika or whatever, and her whole arm smears, so that it looks like it stretches and the colors just, it's almost like an oil painting or something that somebody just took and wiped their hand across as she's swinging, which is a trick that's used in 2D animation as well. It was originated in 2D animation to imply fast motion and give it this sense of motion blur. So you can also use anticipation, which means essentially giving a wind up to the actions. And it's the kind of thing where if you're not trained to look for it, you don't notice it, but if it's missing, you'll feel it. So it gives the what I want to say about this. It gives the it allows you to give the characters. It allows you to characterize the characters, and not just the characters, but other things you might be animating that aren't necessarily characters per se. You still give them character with the way that you make them move, if that makes any sense. And Fortiche is masterful at doing that. They're like, so for example, there are a whole bunch of little things like if you remember the scene where Vi comes into Powder's bunk and tells her that what makes you different makes you strong and so on, and then she has her follow her up to the roof, and so Powder gets out of the bunk and follows her, and then they hold the shot for a little bit, and then they have Powder come back into the frame and turn the little light off at the top of her bunk on, which reminded me an awful lot of a scene in Spirited Away where the little girl slides her shoes on and steps off the step, and then like puts her feet behind her and taps her toe on the ground to jam her shoe on all the way, which we've all done in some form or another. Just little things like that, which you would have to, a lot of the times that's the kind of stuff that's ad-libbed by the actor if you're filming live action. But all of that is planned in any animation, but in Arcane, since we're talking about Arcane specifically, in any animation, whatever you have on screen is there intentionally because the animator has to put it there or it doesn't happen.
Well, that's the difference when you're talking about live action versus animation. An advantage of animation is that the actors and actresses or whatever's on screen will do exactly what you tell it to do.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you have to tell it to do everything.
Yeah.
You don't get the spontaneity of different actors taking on their characters in the background or whatever they're doing that would be extra that they bring.
Mm-hmm.
All of that has to be very deliberate in animation.
Yeah, and that's where animators are off. It's often said that animators are actors without a camera, although a lot of times they'll do the scene in front of a camera so that they can then animate it inside the animation. But the just the technical the way that they did the animation as well. Not only is it all keyframed, which is impressive enough, and yet they still got all of that facial animation and the expressions and like the emoting that you actually very rarely see in animation to that level. But they did stuff like when they rigged up Jinx, when they rigged up adult Powder, or not adult, older Powder, they gave her two separate face rigs, one for Jinx, which is kind of got the brows lowered and sharp chin and more adult features. And then they also gave her a rig that was more like Powder, the child, where her chin kind of pulls back, her cheeks are more rounded, the eyes are wider and more round, giving her a more childish look. And there are if you pay attention, you'll see her face changing its overall morphology depending on her mood and her mental state. Like when she's first introduced in episode 4 as Jinx, taking on, fighting the Firelights in the smuggling blimp, right? The Shimmer smuggling blimp. She comes out and she's throwing grenades and shooting at him and all that kind of stuff. And then she's got the kind of the adult Jinx rig. And then she grabs the hand of the girl with the flare, the Firelight with the flare, and knocks her mask off. And for a second, she thinks it's Vi. She freezes, and her face, when she goes, Vi? And her face shifts into the younger rig. And she's sitting there with rounder cheeks, and her lip is kind of pulled back in. Her bottom lip's kind of pulled back in, and she's back into the mindset of Powder, as she's flashing back to all the stuff with Vi, because you're a Jinx and all of that. And there are numerous scenes where her face shifts back and forth like that. So that's another thing where they're using the medium of animation in a way that you literally could not accomplish with live action, to make it feel realer than real, and also to get across that emotional communication without having to rely on dialogue as the visual storytelling.
Okay, why don't we let James do his opening statement as well? Because I know you've got information on theme and color and stuff like that. So from the technical perspective of the animation, and BGD, I think BGD has a fantastic question in the comments. I've started, so we'll get back to that. But I want to send it over to James about what opening statement you would discuss about Arcane.
Well, to kind of lead off of Sable a little bit. Sorry, I collect my thoughts. The amount of visual communication that's done in this series is extremely dense. the way that the animation is able to convey emotion, and I know it's really easy to say convey emotion, but I want to give some examples. So, like in the very first scene where we see them coming across the bridge through the smoke after we sort of transitioned out of Powder's viewpoint, and it's indicated that their mother has died and they see the body. Vi's character is very calm. She's stoic virtually throughout the entire show. And the way she breaks at her dead mother is the way a calm person breaks. It comes in waves. So you see it first hit her, the corners of her mouth turn down, then her mouth broadens, then her nostrils flare, then she starts to cry. It's a very slow, controlled burn, but it's still very emotional. That's not really easy to do. I'm not an animator. I don't know anything about animation, but I know quality when I see it. It's kind of like carpentry. Like, you might not know why the chair is excellent, but you can tell an excellent chair from a poorly made chair. And I kind of feel like the excellence in the animation shows really, really well, especially in that scene, especially, and then also Powder's manic episode later on in her bedroom. It's just unbelievable that, like, you can watch that scene without any sound whatsoever, know exactly what's going on, know exactly how she feels. You might not know why, you might not know where it's headed, but you can tell right now she's having a manic episode because just the way the eyes are animated, the way the fits are animated, it is a distress that is extreme and likely caused from imbalance. And it's just very, and I don't say that lightly. I'm not trying to I'm not trying to say anything about mental illness here. I'm strictly talking about the way that this was animated. Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Just to hang on the end of what you said there. But regarding the show itself and the theming, I want to mention specifically family. Family is the major overarching theme. Now, Sable, you and I have discussed the questions that the show asks.
Yeah.
I think that's held apart from what the theme of the show is. The theme is family, and it's a wide variety of family. It's the family that you're born into. It's the family that you fight with. It's the family that you get along with. It's the family that you choose. It's the family that chooses you. So family, broadly speaking, writ large, is what the theme of the show is. And most of the emotional touchstones go back to family. And the reason that I think it hits so hard is because we all have those experiences. We all, as human beings, have the family we're born into, the family we choose, the family that we get along with, the family that we don't, the family that chooses us. So we have that entire backlog of experience as human beings. And so we can immediately identify with all the characters. So as we talk throughout the course of this conversation, I'm definitely going to bring things back to family just to sort of highlight that. And then color. Color is extremely important to a larger degree. I would say that the last show that I saw that was this reliant on color theory was Breaking Bad. And this show is jacked up to 11. Mm-hmm. I think that Breaking Bad does it extremely effectively, but I think that Arcane does it so much better because of how ubiquitous and how subtle and how overt and how subversive it is. So, for example, the main characters are named Vi and Powder, and I don't think I've heard anyone bring this up yet, but Powder's a shade of blue. So we have.
Oh, you're right. I don't think people have said that before.
No one's brought that up yet. Right. So we're literally, the characters' names are, I'm going to say red instead of violet. I know violet's a separate color, but there's a reason for that.
Well, she starts out as violet hair before it turns to red too.
Yes. And there's the thing with color here is that, like, there are various shades of purple that mean various different things that show up at various different times. There are various shades of blue that don't necessarily all mean the same thing, but they can certainly be layered over top of one another because there's a layering effect that takes place all throughout the show, specifically with regard to color. So you can see the obvious ones. Piltover is represented by blue. Zaun is represented by green. But So let me get back to the characters first. So Vi and Powder, which are red and blue. Now, these two characters are subversions of those traditional color identities. Blue is very mercurial, so Powder does kind of tend in that direction. But blue is also very cold. It's very liquid. It tends to be very reserved and nurturing. Red tends to be intense and passionate. It is the color of fire. But Vi is stoic throughout the entire show and usually well controlled. And Powder is completely the opposite of that. So there's a subversion of those two colors that take place specifically for those characters. Now, the reason that I'm saying that Vi is red, I'm characterizing her as red instead of actually violet, is because of all of the purple that shows up, which is a cross between Vi and Jinx, essentially. Not always, but sometimes. And I would say that the most overt example of purple actually isn't a cross between the two of them. But there are purples, like Caitlin, for example, who is a very deep indigo purple, who's caught between, and at the end, Jinx actually forces Vi to choose. She says, her or me. And it's essentially a choice that she puts to her. And it's because Caitlin sort of stands in the middle of the two, between the red and the blue. Now, this is going to circle back to what you said, Sable, about the 2D aspects of the animation. So there are 3 color models. There's RGB for photographers. There's
CMYK for print.
Right. The CMYK is the one that's important. So there's RGB, red, green, blue, red, yellow, blue. I guess it's RYB.
Cyan, magenta, yellow, black.
Well, that's for painters, and then CMYK is for print. Cyan, magenta, yellow, black.
Yeah, red, green, blue. Yeah,
that one is important, and the reason that it is important is because in the CMYK model, violet is a red color. It is blue added to red, but it leans more red. The fact that it's a 2D model, right? So print, the fact that it's coming from print in the 2D, and I'm not going to communicate this as well as I need to, but like print it's a 2D medium. The fact that they're relying on CMYK to communicate this visually, the fact that violet in the CMYK model is a red color with blue added, I think is evidence of the fact that Vaya's always acting with Powder in mind, and it's incorporated into her hair. So it's red and blue. It is a part of her biology. It is a part of her genealogy. Meanwhile, with Jinx, she wears purple. It's not a part of her hair. It's not now, and later, and I don't want to steal anyone's thunder here, so we can get into the other aspects of purple with regard to her character later, but she wears purple. So with her, it's a conscious effort because dress is conscious, style is conscious. She has to keep Violet in her conscious mind. And that's perfectly typical of the events that take place to take the two away from one another. Because she wants to keep Vi in mind, because it's a very intentional choice where it's a very natural happenstance for Vi. And that will come up all throughout the story, and it comes up in the question. Last time when you were having this conversation with Doug and Brianna, I said one of the questions the story asks is, who are you willing to sacrifice for what you want? Except for with Vi, where it's, what are you willing to sacrifice for who you want? So again, she subverts that main question, that overarching question. And then I actually thought about it a little bit over the past couple of days, and there's another element to that with a separate character that we haven't discussed in depth yet.
Okay.
With Echo, because his question, and he doesn't sacrifice anything for anyone. He's actually a restorer.
Mm-hmm.
So his color's also green. So like where Zon is the green of chemical and decay, Echo's green is a green of natural growth and foliage. And so even that juxtaposed, like his little alcove where he's helping people and he's bringing a home and a family back to people, and he's trying to restore what they have had sacrificed essentially on their behalf at the mercies of the powers of Zahn and Piltover, I think, is a pretty large point. It's a very solid juxtaposition to make, and we haven't heard him discussed at large, really. But I'll stop there. I want to know like where you guys want to start with regard to like the story and like what things you think we should cover that haven't been covered or need to be gone over again or that sort of thing. Because I could just go.
This isn't necessarily story, but
or yeah,
you mentioned that Powder / Jinx is always wearing purple or pink.
Yeah, her pants are striped purple.
But I mean, even when she was a kid, her shirt was the striped pink shirt too.
Yeah.
She's always, even before she's got shimmer eyes, she's always got that color on her somewhere, wearing it.
Isn't the bow in her hair pink too when she's a kid? The little sprig coming off the side. I didn't quite know.
I'd have to go and pull it up again. I don't remember.
Me too.
But that makes me think of an interview I saw about the making of the show, where somebody asked, like, how did you get it to look so painted? And they're like, well, we painted it. I mean, that's another thing too. Okay, this is going to be tying back to the animation again. That's another thing too, is that another thing people don't really realize about this show is that it's actually not 3D animated.
That's what was brought up.
The only things that are 3D animated are the characters themselves. Like by 3D, I mean actual polygonal models that are rigged. Are the characters themselves and any props that they interact with. But all of the environments that they are in, those are all painted 2D ahead of time. You're essentially watching a show of matte paintings, and then they map that painting onto a 3D lighting model, essentially, so that the characters can move around and behind certain things that they need to interact with, and their lighting will be cast on those objects. You can really actually see that in the scene where Silco's in Marcus' house in his daughter's room, and like Silco's shadow falls across the corner of the room, but there's also like this wainscoting above the baseboard, which you have to really be watching and paying attention to it. The shadow should deform over the wainscoting as well as just the wall as a whole, and it doesn't quite. But you would never notice it, just because it's such a small detail, unless you were looking for it and going frame by frame, which obviously I've done. But they're treating it like even more so than what they did in the Spider-Verse, Enter the Spider-Verse, right? Where they had a whole bunch of integration between 2D and 3D and drawing on the film, or even certain frames of animation were just hand sketched, stuff like that. This show's taken that to the next level and really integrating 3D into more traditional 2D techniques. But again, that goes into everything on the screen has to be meticulously planned ahead of time. So all of the color choices are very deliberate. Now, where was I going with that? What was the question? Sorry. I was just going stream of consciousness there.
No problem. I think I asked where you wanted to start with regard to like story beats and whatnot. But in the meantime,
I have lists.
All right. There's a duplicate of comments here by TSL Frontman about blue and red. He says blue is chaotic because ephemeral and fluid. Red is solid fire and movable.
Oh, right here.
Confidence. So, but here's the thing: blue also represents ice, and it also represents healing. And fire also represents explosive passion and just wanton consumption. So like there are aspects of these colors for sure that complement their characters, but traditionally I would say the characters themselves are a subversion of what we would be expecting from those colors. And that's my take, and I could be wrong. Yours is just as valid as mine. I'm just explaining why I said what I said.
Well, let me, on the subject of color, I'm going to come back to BGD. I want to come back to BGD. But since we're on the subject of color right now, Druden Fuzz says, I'm not sure if the colors can be interpreted too heavily, since those decisions of how they look happened in the game many years before the story was formed. Now, this is something I don't know as much about because I don't know anything about the game. I just watched the show. So is that valid? I mean, I don't know. So what is your response to what Druden Fuzz
Their
said?
designs were changed pretty completely from the game to the show.
Yeah.
Like if you take a look at Vi from the show next to Vi in the game as she first appeared, there is drastic departure from one another.
Same for Jinx.
Additionally, the choice of personality was a conscious decision made. So I would say that the concept of the color meaning is layered in over top of what did previously exist, but where they needed to make changes, they absolutely made those changes.
The color, the color application throughout the show is also extremely deliberate. I mean, this could be, if you want to go here, this is the perfect place to transition into my discussion about the eye colors.
Yeah. Please do.
Okay. So,
also before you get there, I want to mention that while I stuck to red and blue pretty primarily, gold, red, yellow, green, obviously, like different shades of green, different shades of blue. Like it's more than just the two colors. Those two colors are on the poster, and they're the most apparent because they're in the characters. But the vast majority of the colors represented in the show are layered in through meaning and on top of meaning, and it's just. But go ahead. I just wanted to make sure
that's
knew that it's not. We're not just dealing with blue and red here. It's literally, virtually every color in the show.
Yeah. In fact, you could even say that the characters that weren't in the show, like Silco and Mel and what have you, the colors were even more important for them.
Oh, for sure.
Ambessa Medarda, Mel's mom, is all red and black.
I love saying that name.
Ambessa Medarda. It's a great name.
I love that name.
I mean, it's just the show is like we could be here all night. I have stuff on animation. I have stuff on the music. I have stuff on the cinematography with the transitions.
We'll do the eyes. Let's do the eyes.
So I've got the eyes.
Go with that. Sure, let's start with that.
Okay, so, and this is funny because I dropped this on James earlier today. I'm still trying to figure out some stuff about why Vi's eyes change colors when they do, and he's like,
and I went, what?
Vi's eyes change colors
the whole time.
Yeah, no,
because of course they're not.
I'm like, what? No, they're not. and this was something that I mean, I'm an animator, so I pick up on things like that pretty easily. But both, as far as I can tell, other than one, possibly two instances, Powder / Jinx and Vi are the only characters that this is done to, but their eyes change color throughout the show. They both start out as gray. And Powder / Jinx is actually really straightforward with how her eyes change, so we'll do her first. She starts out as this kind of dark slate gray. And the first time we see, here's another interesting thing too, is that Vi has a dark ring around her eyes, almost like a wall, almost like she's put a barrier around herself, and Powder doesn't. Powder's eyes are pretty much all uniform color. But as far as powder goes, like I said, dark slate gray is what her color is when we first see her. And she gets the first eye color change, which is when she picks up the hex crystal in Jace's apartment, right in the middle of their little heist that they're doing. And it's not a reflection, because you can see a reflection when she pulls the crystals out of her pocket in the alley after Vander leaves. Once they've come back, after Vander is heading over to Benzo's, and she's rooting around in the dumpster outside, she remembers that she has the crystals in her pocket, and she pulls them out, and there is a reflection there in her eyes, and it's just this little blue slash across her iris. But in this case, the first time she picks up the hex crystal, her entire iris changes to blue and matches the crystal. And then once she puts them in her pocket, she's back to gray. The next time that her eyes change color is when she is melting down in episode 3, when all her kids leave her behind to go rescue Vander, and she picks up her backpack and she is going to throw it, and then she just drops it, luckily. And the crystals bounce out of it, and she looks up at them, and this one's really interesting. This is not a reflection either, because the color change in her iris is almost like it has motion to it. It's almost like a little fire in her iris, and it spreads outside of the iris and it influences the sclera around them. As she's playing back the events in the apartment with the explosion back in her head, and realizing that this must have been what caused it. And that glow, that little fire, that blue fire in her iris then fades out, and she wipes her hand across her eyes, and they're back to gray. And she says, "I can help him." So it's, well, we'll just chart the progression of her eye color first, and I'll go back in time some of them together. So then the next time that we see her eye color change is at the very end of episode 3, once Silco puts his arms around her and says, "We will show them all." And she looks up at the camera from inside the crook of his elbow, and her eye is purple. The same, it's not quite shimmer purple yet, because it's not glowing, but it's the same color. Showing that, oh, here we go. This is the start of the transition into Jinx now. And this, you'll probably enjoy this, actually, Keith. But that shot of her looking up in Silco's elbow, that's actually a reference. And I didn't remember the name of the artist or the name of the painting, but I had to go and look it up. But it's a reference to a painting called "The Fallen Angel" by French artist Alexandre Cabanel, and it's a painting of Lucifer after he's been cast from heaven.
Oh, whoa!
and what's so iconic about it is that he's kind of leaning on his back, and he's got a tear coming out of his eye, but it's this expression of rage, and he's got his arm over his face, covering all of his face except for his eyes, just like in the show. That was not an accident.
Oh,
so if you look at
fantastic,
if you look up that painting, you'll be like, oh yeah, of course.
What's the name of the painting? Let me.
You like angels?
It's called.
I do like angels. That's kind of what
especially Lucifer. I mean, especially those corruption artists, right?
What is the name of the painting?
It's called "The Fallen Angel" by Alexander Cabanel. Or you can, if you want to Google it, you can just put Lucifer angry or something like that.
No, I got it.
Oh yeah.
Are you going to put it in the?
No, I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to bring it up on screen. Hang on.
Yeah, I have it here too.
This one right here. This is what you're talking about?
That's the one. Yeah, it's famous. It's famous because of Lucifer's expression. Look at that. He's looking up with the one eye right over his elbow there.
So that's Powder Jinx expression.
Yeah.
When she looks up over when, oh, wow.
Yeah, right? Yeah, the symbolism there. And not only are they referencing this painting, but again, that's the first time that she has a purple iris. From that point on, when we first see her again in episode 4, all the way until episode 7, her eyes are universally blue the whole time. They're not gray anymore, because she is that blue. Okay, here's where we can tie it in. That blue fire, where she was inventing in her head. She was like, hey, these little crystals, they're power and explosions, and I can do stuff with them. Well, now she is that person, right? She is what Victor calls her design. She is an inspired inventor. The form is crude, but the engineering is inspired. She's become an engineer and an inventor.
Yes, and
an artificer.
And one of the layers of blue in the show is magic, science,
right,
and progress. And so as she's inventing, her eyes are blue.
Yeah, that particular color of blue is Hextech blue.
Yes. And then actually also because she is the most mechanically apt of the characters that, of the original child characters.
Right.
That's sort of another layer in over top of the blue color for her hair.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to point, when you brought up the point of the angel and stuff like that, like when we're looking at this, this is the kind of stuff that I love in filmmaking or TV, whatever, the video medium. And that you really want to be able to do, like this reference to this particular painting here.
Yeah.
But I think that shows to me, I mean, I don't know how you do that. The only way that I would know how to do that is I know what to do as a writer, that like you're going to go through with all the writing and you're going to have all of your references and so forth with the writing. You get all of the dialogue and the writing down, and you have all the layers of references in the writing. If you're going to have references like this in the visual aspect, that you're talking about colors of eyes that are going to change, the particular pose of a character that references a painting. I mean, the only way I know how to do that at the moment, at my level of understanding, is to be like, all right, we're gonna pay as much attention to the storyboarding and the visual as we did to the writing.
That's all directorial, I would think. Like those are choices that the director would make. I don't know how easy it is to communicate that in writing.
Well, right. Yeah, and I know. But like, I know how to, like, I'm just saying as a writer, as predominantly the writer, like Brianna is the director, but like predominantly as the writer, it's like, okay, I understand interweaving a whole bunch of different references through writing, or like we talk about Star Trek 6, we talk about, direct quotes from Shakespeare that are being used that mean different things.
Yeah. But
that as a writer, you spend a lot of time on that to put in. Okay. So it must be, my point was, it must be that you spend, the only way to do this, something that complex from the visual side is to spend just as much time with the storyboarding and that you do on the writing side. Yeah, and that's how I think you create something this amazing when you're talking about something, which we've talked about amazing things here, that with the writing side of things, and you spend just as much time, because you're not going to be able to come up with a shot that is a reference to a painting of Lucifer on the fly. Well, you might be able to come up with that on the fly for one shot, like, because it might be something that you know of. But if you're trying to actually integrate this into the artistic aspect of the show, you're not going to be able to create all of that stuff on the fly. You're only able to create that stuff because you think about that in advance in great detail.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, this is, you're not wrong. I do not disagree. But at the same time, Arcane is a perfect example of the strengths of collaboration and allowing the artists to be artists. Because Riot were the ones who were writing the show, But then they just sent it over to Fortiche over in France or Belgium or wherever they are. And they were like, they know what they're doing. So just make it the best you can. Is basically what they told them. And so Fortiche put all sorts of, the animators and artists in Fortiche put all sorts of little extra stuff in there that Riot did not have. Like, for example, Silco's little ashtray with like best dad on it, and it's like the one that Jinx made for him and scribbled all over. That was not in the script. That was just a touch that they put in there that makes the world feel even more real and the characters feel even more real, right? Same with the scene where Vi's walking out of the brothel and she stops and realizes that Caitlyn's in a room, in the Artemis room. And she stops and looks, and then she does that head tilt with that kind of half smile and is like, goes and starts walking again. That the way that expression was executed was not in the script. It was just like she walks by, she notices Caitlyn talking with the other girl in the Artemis room and what have you. And whereas Fortiche, because they are consummate animators and consummate character actors, really gave it that personality that you really can't in a screenplay. That's where the art comes from, and that's where the knowledge of acting and knowledge of using animation to its strengths comes in.
Completely agree.
So, yes, you're right, but it's also, I mean, you can get into just as deep a discussion about the music.
Well, right,
everything, like it's everything in the show. It's everything.
No, I guess what I'm advocating here is that music, yes, absolutely. Let's add music to that.
And sound design.
You want to talk about writing? What do you? Well, I was trying to say, what do you hear? I guess writing, but that could be music. But anyway, the writing of the script, the visual of what you see as far as the cinematography, what you hear as far as the music. Maybe there are other categories, but when all of those things are paid great attention to,
yes,
you can have something really great, because you can say, hey, I'm a great writer, so I'm going to write something here, and it's amazing. Okay, now I just need visuals and get some really, C grades, completely satisfactory, but C grade visuals. But if somebody spends the same amount of time that you spent on the writing on the visuals, you multiply the meaning of the film, because you got this but then the meaning of the writing and the visuals are a multiplicative effect, or whatever.
It becomes a synergy, greater than the sum of
multiplicative effect rather than just an additive effect. Yes.
Yeah,
it's a concert. It's a concert instead of one voice. It's a
right. And that's what. Exactly. So Tim says Sable is correct. It's highly unlikely that a single creative vision produced all of those genius details. They clearly had a lot of excellent storytellers in every department.
Yes.
Trying to tell the story.
Exactly.
Yes. I guess
it's really lightning in a bottle what they've done. They spent 6 years on it, so they were able to get away with a lot that maybe a lot of people can't when they're doing something like this. But
the expectation wasn't that it was going to hit this hard either. I think it was just like they spent 6 years on it, and then they were like, well, we told the community we were working on this. Let's go ahead and just release it. And they dropped it and it just exploded.
Well, it was a troublesome production too, because they'd never done anything like this before. And so, what's their names? I should have looked them up. Anyway, the showrunner and the main writer went and they wrote the script, and they did the story treatment, wrote the script and everything, put together the screenplay for the pilot and all that kind of stuff, and took it to Riot, and they're like, no, this is bad. and they'd spent a bunch of time on it already, and they're like, okay, now what do? We can either quit or we can start over, essentially. And they decided to start over and bring in professional writers and other things like that to help them. And what came out was genius. But there's if anybody who has I'm assuming that everybody in the chat has watched the show. If you have
spoilers, if you have
Spoilers are allowed.
I
Right?
mean,
You're here on a deep dive.
This
You're
is free.
allowed,
This is.
so go for it.
But if you have watched the show, but you haven't watched the documentary, it's free on YouTube. It's called Bridging the Rift. It's about the making of Arcane. It's great. It gives you a lot of additional insight into exactly what they had.
Is that the one that I shared a clip with you, Sable, and you were like, "Yeah, idiot! I told you to watch this."
Oh yes, yes. I forgot about that, but you're right. That did happen.
Somebody in the comments, and I don't remember who it was, but somebody actually had mentioned, or Bridging the Rift had been brought up, and then somebody had said, "Oh no, that's a documentary about the show."
Yeah.
And I went, "Oh, I have to watch," but I have not seen it yet. Okay, I'm saving it right now. So Bridging the Rift, I'm going to watch that.
It's like 5 episodes of 15 or 20 minutes, something like that. It's not too long.
Yeah, it's not awful.
Yeah, but it's worth it. Absolutely. So anyway, where were we?
Well, Zero the Blade says, well, first of all, the writing crew was excellent during the creation of Arcane, and they knew what they were doing.
Yes.
Arcane was for the fans first to test the series' greatness, not to mention the rewrites with all the new characters that were added.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a particular. They brought in a professional writer who, I should have maybe watched this again too. I forget her name, but she's the one who really kind of pulled it together for them. That being said, those two guys, you know what? While we're talking, I'm gonna look it up. That being said, those two guys, the showrunner and the lead writer, were the ones who wrote episode 1 and episode 9. So they're responsible for the foundation and for the capstone. With her help, like she gave them a lot of it, did a lot of changes on Jinx's dialogue in episode 9 and that kind of stuff. But despite what these guys say, they'd never done anything like this before, but they sure did hit it out of the park after the first try, on their second try or whatever it was.
Yeah, like it was a tortured development, but man, oh man,
it was worth it. I pulled my notes back up here, and now I remember where we were. We were in the middle of talking about Jinx's eye color. Changes.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
So, well, I'm sure that's going to happen all. That's going to happen all tonight. I'm sure.
Yeah, I know. I'm just.
So, like we were talking about her eye color being blue and inventing and blah blah blah. That's how we got on that. So anyway, it's all the way from episode 4 up to episode 7, and all the way to the end of episode 7. Her eye color is blue, uniform blue, the whole time. Doesn't ever change. Then we all know what happens at the end of episode 7. We could spend an entire table talk just on that one fight scene between Echo and Jinx, because that is freaking genius.
Yep. I play ... for keeps.
So okay.
It's so good.
But when I tell you what happens with Jinx here at the end of it, it's going to blow your mind even more.
The animation?
It's not even that. No.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Okay. So I mean, yes, like I said, we could spend a whole table talk just on that one scene because there's so much there. It is pure art. However, as far as what the characters have done, Echo and Jinx have been at war, right? These two childhood best friends. And by the way, apparently Echo had a crush on Powder too.
I was picking up on that in some of the material I was watching later. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So childhood best friends, and for Echo, it's even a little more than that. And yet they've been at war this whole time. And Echo has said more than once. He said at least 2 times, I think 3. Yeah, no, he said it 3 times. That's who she is now. You can't change her. Right? She's Jinx now. There's no Powder there. He said it. He's repeated this. And yet, what does he do when they get on the bridge face to face? they're both staring at each other, angry, ready to go, and then he stops and he starts playing the game again. Drops his watch, starts the pendulum tick-tock. Hey, you remember this when we were kids? And it was genius storytelling. No dialogue at all, purely with the animation, the character interaction, and whatever. So he has, and he's like making an offer, and she accepts it. And they go back to that mindset when they were kids, right?
Is it play? Yeah.
Yeah. And that sets up, that's Echo's downfall and Jinx's, because what happens is, when he dodges this time, and he smacks her across the face. It's so brutal. He smacks her across the face with his pipe. Probably breaks her nose. That's why she's bleeding everywhere. And then he gets down on top of her and he just starts beating on her. And she that's so good. If you look at that scene as he's on top of her and he like pulls his fist back, and she shakes her head, and as it looks down finally at her face, she shakes her head and is looking up, opens up her eyes, and they're gray again.
Oh.
For the first time in four episodes, for the first time since Vi walked away from her, her eyes are gray again. And by the way, her face has gone back to the powder rig, and she looks scared. And Echo stops because they're playing for keeps, but they stepped back into that mindset of the past. And
Zero the Blade, speaking of that, Zero the Blade just made an incredibly insightful comment. He rewinds time to fight her on an even playing field. This isn't something that's expressed in the show, but in the game, Echo's whole gimmick is rewinding time.
Mm-hmm.
So he has a double that follows him, and he can rewind time to where the double is. And that hadn't even occurred to me, and that's absolutely a brilliant comment.
Yep, that's exactly what's going on.
That's absolutely brilliant. I didn't even pick up on it. There's too much here. It's too dense.
That's why then when they play out him imagining them playing the game, he's like gets shot with a pink paintball, by the way, same color as Shimmer. And then he smacks his pocket watch down on the ground, and then it goes ding, and it was right back to where they were. And then now let's do it for real. Yep. So great. But this is
absolutely perfect. Thank you for that, Zero.
Yeah. It's a brilliant scene. But a lot of people interpret, so then they're looking at each other, right? And Powder, she's scared. They meet each other's eyes, and they just look. And then her expression just kind of softens, and she just rolls the grenade out. And a lot of people think she's trying to kill Echo there. I've seen a lot of commentary and that kind of stuff saying, oh, she's trying to kill Echo. No, if she was trying to kill Echo, she would have clamped her chomper grenade onto his vest, right? She's trying to kill herself. She's back to Powder. Powder was in there. Echo was wrong. Because he brought it back to the even playing field, like Zero the Blade said, he brought it out. He brought Powder back. What Vi couldn't do, Echo did. And Powder gives up. She's like, all right, my sister just walked away from me again. My best friend is beating the tar out of me. And what have I got after this? I'm just going to end it here. And then, of course, the grenade goes off. If you listen to it, there's a clank right before. So I would imagine that Echo might have batted the grenade away with his pipe or something right before it went off. There's like a ting, it blows up from way back across the bridge when you're looking at it. Possibly saving Jinx's life as well, actually, because even though the grenade went off and almost killed her, it injured her very badly. It didn't kill her outright. But the next time that we see Jinx's eyes is when she's being operated on with Shimmer by Singed, and from that point on, her eyes are purple for the rest of the show. However, there is still a bit of a there's still a little bit of nuance to that too, because once she's done with the operation, the next time that we see her in action is when she's in Caitlyn's bathroom, kidnapping her after her shower, and the eye comes up she looks up into the mirror and the eye's glowing. When her eyes are glowing, from this point on in the show, they're always glowing, at least faintly. But if she's in enough of a brightly lit area, you can't really tell. But when she's actually mainlining the shimmer to use it, the glow fades through her pupil as well, and it's really bright, and her iris and her pupil is washed out purple as well. And so we see her kidnapping Caitlyn. We see her at Vander's statue as Silka was talking to him, saying, is there anything so undoing as a daughter? And her eyes are still glowing with that glowing into her pupil. And then the third one is when she appears behind Vi after Vi's just beaten Savika, and cold cocks her, says bravo, says whack, and the glow is still bleeding into her iris that whole time. And then,
so did she succeed at the bridge then?
What was that?
I said, so did she succeed at the bridge?
Yes, that's the point. You're already there. Yes, exactly. At that point, Powder is dead. Right now, from this point on, we are 100% pure Jinx the whole time. So what she's doing at the Mad Tea Party, once she is talking with Vi, the glow is died down, and you can see her pupils and everything. But the choice that she's giving Vi is not bringing Powder back. It's like she's saying, you can have Powder back. She's negotiating and manipulating at the same time. She's offering something she really doesn't have to offer anymore. It was a foregone conclusion at this point that she's going to sit in Jinx's chair.
Well, I think that Powder dies several times throughout the show. I think she's killed by a lot of different people, including herself. And I think at the end, whatever was left of Powder was likely had already been destroyed. But I think there's vestigial bits there, because the reason that I'm saying this is because Jinx is represented by animals throughout the entire show. The first time we see Powder, there's a bird in the sky. And the animals are always flocking animals, family animals, or pack animals every time. Until the end, when it's a solitary hunter in the form of Fishbones, her rocket launcher. So this entire evolution is her going from desiring a family, desiring a pack, and then finally at the very end, after she's already become Jinx and then also lost her father figure, she's now a solitary apex predator. And that's when the rocket goes loose. And,
that's why it's a shark. Eh?
Right. So I feel like, all the way up until she actually lifts that rocket launcher, all the way up until she actually becomes that apex predator, that's the finale. Prior to that, there's still maybe a little whiff, a little hint, but it just, things do not unfold in a favorable way. And I think that she blames Vi likely for all of it. Even though Powder at this point had been killed probably 2 or 3 times, it was still her it was a reaction to protect her sister that got Silco killed.
Right.
So, like, you can still probably make an argument that Powder is in there vestigially, but that definitively, like, once she loses Silco, that is it. She is Jinx. She's a solitary apex predator, and she's going to hunt.
Yes, I would agree that once Silco's dead, that she is now fully settled into the Jinx role. Because it's the first time that we hear the voices whispering to her that she doesn't respond to. We hear the voices whispering, and she just, like, she has that kind of dead expression after she's finished crying, and the voices whisper at her, and then she gets up and she goes to the chair. So she's done arguing at this point with the voices.
And she's also now acting, because in the very first episode, when they're running and they get hung up by the bullies, and there's that one shot of Powder kind of in a halo, and everything is happening around her, but she's not having an effect on what's happening. So things are kind of happening to her, but she's not acting. That is sort of kind of the way that she's played through the rest of the show, until she chooses at the end her own choices. So, like, she is a tool of Silco's, and while they do have that father-daughter relationship, he is an enabler, and she is affecting change. It's at his behest. So he's fueling her manic behavior, and he's allowing her to go off the deep end because it serves his purposes. So it's not a healthy father-daughter relationship, obviously, but it is there. And then finally, at the end, she makes a choice independent of Silco. After she's received encouragement from him, you're already perfect. So he tells her, that his final act was to enable her. And, like, that sort of helped push her over the edge. The fact that it was Vi, her reaction to protect Vi, like an involuntary reaction, I imagine she blames Vi for further distancing those two. But the whole show, from the time we first see her, she's not really doing anything that she wants to do. She's doing what she's told to do. She's following the group, but then ultimately finally makes that last decision to blow up Piltover. And that's really her first decision.
Well, she independently made the decision to go rob Progress Day too.
I mean, I guess so, but she was still under Silco's thumb, so, like, I don't disagree, but it's not as, like, definitive as that final act that she makes, because, like, it still ends up benefiting Silco. There is a little bit of an argument about it, but then she says, hey, look, actually, I was doing this for you, kind of, sort of. If I'm remembering things correctly, as I admitted before the show, I didn't get a chance to rewatch before we had this sit down. But I feel like her character is really informed by that last moment.
Oh yeah, for sure.
in a very,
not gonna argue that.
Like, I guess I'm not really communicating this effectively. Like, I guess it's her situation. Like, her situation is that she's being used as a tool, and where she does kind of act on her own sometimes, it's still in the interest of someone else. She does have her own motivations. She does have her own drive. She does have her own agenda, but it's really kind of at the behest of someone else, and things are happening around her that she's reacting to. So she's constantly being used in a reactive capacity. And then at the end, she finally decides no longer to be reactive and to force people to react to her.
I
guess that's kind of more close to what I'm trying to communicate.
And first, I think blowing up the council is when she feels like she really knows where she is and where she stands.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Right, and I agree with that. Yes.
Yes, but still, blowing up the council is still, she's doing it for Silco. Because remember, as she gets up there with fish bones, she's pointing it, she hasn't fired it yet. She hears Silco, just like you said at the end of episode 3, we'll show them. we will show them all.
Yeah, but he's dead at that point, and so
Yeah, but it's still she's enacting what he wanted.
yes,
It's her way of granting him his final wish, essentially.
I would say that it's more her having bought into the vision, even if it's not a vision of Zahn, it's a vision of destruction. And so, I mean, I guess we could kind of sit here and take either point and kind of both be correct about it. But in my view, I'll say, I
still don't think she would have done it if Vi had passed quote unquote her tests, though. Because also remember, I think probably the most important part of dialogue in the show is when she says, "I thought you could love me like you used to, even though I'm different." Because you remember what Vi said to her in episode 2 just before she was going to turn herself in. What makes you different makes you strong. And then we hear that again once Powder is back in the arcade and puts the machine back together and tries to beat Vi's high score. As she's standing there in front of the machine,
great scene,
going through stuff from her past. One of the things that comes up is Vi telling her, "What makes you different makes you strong." Mm-hmm. So then, and that's in episode 5 too, isn't it?
I don't know what episode it's in, but that's a great scene. She misses. She's off the score by, it's 100 minus 6 points.
Yeah.
It's a great scene, and it's like, it's just perfect. The numbers they picked were perfect.
Yes, it is in episode 5.
The scene itself is perfect. It's just great.
I actually think that that Arcane follows the 4-act theatrical plot structure, which puts the climax right in the middle.
Yeah.
And so you have Act 1 setup, Act 2 rising action, climax, Act 3 consequence, basically Act 4 resolution. Even though Arcane is presented in 3 acts, 3 sets of 3 episodes. If you look at it from a total narrative, the climax is right in episode 5 is where everything kind of kicks off into its inevitable motion. It's the climax. I actually think that episode 5 is, you could argue this, episode 5 though, structurally I think is the best episode of the whole series because it's the climax. And everything just
interesting.
It's nobody chooses episode 5 as their favorite episode. Why? Because you have episode 3. You have the showstoppers, right? Episode 3, episode 6, episode 7 with the bridge fight, episode 9. Those are the ones that people always go for. But structurally,
I'm just writing this down so I know. You're saying that you believe this adheres to a 4-act structure with episode 5 at the climax.
Yes.
Okay.
And episode 5 is a perfect. That's so much is going on so many levels. It is a perfectly written episode. Perfectly written. And it's the one where Jinx fights the machine and can't beat Vi's score.
How many episodes are there overall? It's
9.
Isn't it 3 sets of 3, right? It's 9.
Yeah. So 5 is dead in the middle.
Yeah, so that would absolutely make sense. That absolutely fits.
Yeah.
Tim made a comment that Fishbones has a specific connection to Silco because the giant fish in episode 1 when we first see him, fish are his symbol.
Well, that and also
right here.
Yeah.
Fishbones has a symbolic connection to Silco. Remember the giant fish in episode 1?
Yeah.
When we first see Silco.
He's down. When we're introduced to him, he's down in the depths. There are the giant monsters and the aquatic monsters out there. The big fish. Also, Fishbones also only has one eye.
Yes, Fishbones does only have one eye. So
that's. I mean, yeah, it's Silco.
I mean, okay, I get it. But I still think that. I think that Jinx is delivering her own vision of what should be into the world, whether it's just destruction for the sake of destruction or whether she's now a true believer in, elevating Zahn, and whether or not Fishbones is actually a remnant of Silco, which makes sense in the context of her character because she's constantly looking to the past and those who had the greatest influence on her.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I see it. I'm angry about it, but I'll get over it, I think. I don't know. Maybe because I missed that, I have to revise. But I still think it's still certainly Jinx make that final decision she makes, like Infer says up earlier. So he says, I think, or they say, pardon me, I think blowing up the council is when Jinx feels like she really knows who she is and where she stands. Everything else she does was to prove herself to others. And that final act was not to prove herself to anyone. In fact,
that's true.
It was in defiance of the audience. It was in defiance of Caitlyn. It was in defiance of the council. It was in defiance of virtually everyone. And then they continue. I think it's different to do something for Silco to honor him versus everything else where she's doing it for his approval. She can no longer get his approval. He's dead. So she does it to honor him. Like that is certainly a quality of the motivation, I think. But I am of that opinion. I think that it's her first act free and clear of the desire for approval. I think it's her first act free and clear of things that are happening around her and to her, but not because of her. I think that's really her defining moment when she really truly has become Jinx. Like, I think that there are many little deaths of Powder over the course of the series, and I think there are many transitions to Jinx over the course of the series, but I think they're all unified in that one final trigger pull.
Thematically speaking, I don't think that, because if Powder was really, left behind, then Silco wouldn't have been trying to tell her, Here's the other thing that I would counterpoint with that is when Silco's trying to baptize her in the river and telling her you need to let Powder die. Jinx is perfect, referring to her in third person. That's at the end. He tells her you're perfect. He recognizes that now she's not Powder anymore.
That's true, but also to my point, baptism is a symbolic death. So
yeah, it is, but it doesn't work. Is the thing.
Yeah.
Because she's still trapped in the same loops, still obsessing over Vi.
I think it's a question all the way up to the end. Yeah, I think that it's a question all the way up to the end, even at the tea party.
But your point is correct, though. Like, your point is that once Powder is out of the picture, that's when she can start acting on her own. Actually, when she starts acting is right after the surgery, right? She leaves and she goes on her own and grabs Caitlyn. She's got a plan now that she's enacting for nobody but herself. Then she goes and she grabs Silco. She kidnaps Silco.
Yeah, she does kidnap Silco. She is absolutely acting.
And then she's like, okay, screw this. Powder's dead. I tried to kill Powder. I'm still alive. So we're going to force the issue. I'm done sitting around waiting for people not to lie to me anymore. I'm going to grab everybody who's causing my torment, quote unquote, that she thinks is causing all of her torment. And I'm going to make them love me, basically, is what she's doing.
I mean, it's kind of like the Mad Tea Party is kind of like putting everyone in a room, putting mom and dad in a room and forcing them to make nice. Yeah, it's kind of like that in a very twisted, subverted kind of a way.
I don't think she doesn't have. It's not that she knows the results she wants to get. She's just like, all these people are causing all of my problems, so I'm gonna force them to stay all in one place where they can't all at once, so I can deal with it all at once, you know. And I don't think that she was capable even of doing that up until the point where she actually let Powder die and tried to kill Powder herself. She was Powder at the moment.
Okay,
Anyway.
wait a minute. I got two things to interject with.
Yeah.
The first thing is Druden Fuzz says,
So agreeable.
guys, don't be so agreeable.
We better pick a different topic.
We're
that
gonna
we can get
need-
each other's throats on.
We're going to need some blood here coming up. So we need some blood here. Okay, so we got you, Druden Fuzz. We're going to need some blood. But then quite independently of this, I just noticed that I got a text message from my brother. And my brother asks, how many episodes of Arcane do I have to watch before I can make my determination? Because I've been trying to get him to watch this.
Make his determination of what?
Whether or not he likes it or not, whether he should continue
Oh.
watching.
I'll tell you
Just
what,
tell
lie to
episode
women,
3.
lie to him and tell him 1, so that way he thinks that it's a minimal investment, and it'll hook him. Just rely on this. Just trust in the show. It'll hook him. I'm kidding. Don't lie to your brother.
Insist that he watch it. Insist that he watches until episode 3.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I would
Nobody
say
gets by episode 3 without being like, "Oh my
by
gosh!"
the time you get to episode 3, if you get to episode 3, then you're in. Like that was
Episode 3 it's so incredible. Like the reversals are so emotionally fatiguing
from the start of the episode.
It's so emotionally fatiguing. It's like my God, my God, like all from start to finish. It's just we got you. We got you again. We got you. It's just very, very fatiguing emotionally, and it's a great
Tim
episode.
says
I think
3.
That's why it hits
Tim
like a
says
truck.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
3 is probably
Here the Blade says Act 1.
which
Yeah,
would be, I think, the first 3 episodes.
TSL Frontman says pay him XX dollars if he watches episode 3.
And stops there.
I'll give you $100 if you can stop at episode 3. That's a good one.
Tim says, as someone who introduced several friends to us, you don't get to the show. Like till the end of episode 3, right? Yeah, no, I agree with that.
It seems like it's going to be a kind of a standard young adult adventure kind of story. Nope.
Yeah, nah.
Yeah,
not here.
Now this is a Greek tragedy. Everything about it's Greek tragedy. I need to hit the restroom, so I'm going to mute real quick for a minute or two, and you guys can talk amongst yourselves.
So I'm writing back to my brother right now, so everybody can. So I said I'm online right now talking about this. I brought up your question, so here's what is being said. Some people say that I should only say episode 1,
and then
because
dare
the
him not to
story
watch
stands
anymore.
on its own.
Yeah.
But episode 3. But by the time you get to episode 3, you are deep in. If you watch episode 3, you are deep in.
You have to see what comes next after episode 3 for sure.
Well, once you hit episode 3, you are in, and you have to see what happens next. Like, I would say if I were to sit down with him, that I'd watch episodes 1 to 3.
Yeah, sure.
Because if you watch that, like, say, you sit down with me, watch episodes 1 to 3. So I would say episodes 1 to 3.
I was actually prepping this. Pardon me. I was prepping to watch the original conversation you had with Doug and Brianna by watching the show, because it was the first time I'd watched it, just like you. And I think Candace came in I think it was halfway through episode 3. And from that point forward, she had to watch the rest of the show with me. So I think episode 3, independent of the first 2, will hook him. But obviously, if you're going to watch 3, you might as well just watch them all. Watch the first 3.
Yeah, I would say that too. So if I were to sit down, I would want to go episodes 1 to 3. And
there's to kind of go off on a bit of a tangent. Knowing where the characters end up from having played the game and knowing the lore of the game makes a lot of it makes watching some of these stories that much more tragic. Like, I know where Victor ends up, you know?
And it's not good.
I was just, after Heath had responded to his brother, I was just kind of segueing into knowing where the characters end up because I am familiar with the game. And like some of these stories are just much more tragic. And you know, there's banter in the game when you play League of Legends. Some of the characters have banter with one another. Like Caitlyn and Vi obviously have banter. Jinx and Vi obviously have banter. But there's banter between Vi and some other characters. And now it's like it hits harder because you know where it's coming from. And I don't want to bring any of it up for risk of future spoilers. I don't want to do that to anyone. But there's, and Sable Phoenix knows this because we've discussed it before, but there's a character in particular that asks Vi in League of Legends where she learned how to fight. And it's now a pretty devastating question. But it's, it'll be interesting to see how that comes up in season 2, which should be, I guess, debuting when? This year, next year, end of this year?
November.
Okay.
This year. So
It's November of this year. We get another one.
Yeah, so 3 years to the month after the first season aired. So I assume they'll do it the same. Three episodes in the first weekend of November, and then 3 on the subsequent 2 each weekend. Anyway, yeah. Oh, by the way, is your name Druden? When I see an SZ like that, I think of it as a zh sound. So is it Druden Fuge, or Druden Fuzz? How do you like to, if it matters to you?
I've been saying Druden Fuzz, but that
I think there's actually a T between the S and the Z. I think it's German. Druden Futz.
Oh, is it supposed to be a T?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, Druden Fuzz or Druden Fuzz, let us know.
Maybe if we're butchering your name, sorry.
Well, he's mentioned growing up in Germany before.
Okay.
In chat, so I just assumed. So I could be wrong, but that's what I assumed.
Okay, that was just something that passed through my
TSL Frontman says, though, any thoughts on the punching the machine symbolism?
The arcade
on
game?
the arcade on the boxing arcade game.
Vi punching the machine, and then later Powder doing that, Jinx doing that.
Well, there's all sorts of iconography going on there. There's Powder scribbled Milo's face on the central punching plate. It's in an arcade where there's so much in the show. I was just noticing this today when Jinx rather comes back to the arcade in episode 5.
Mm-hmm.
She's going underwater. There's mermaids on the wall, and their tails are the same color as her hair. There are 2 of them, and their tails look like, they're not scales. They look like braids. It's just you could take any scene in this show and sit there and pare away at it with a knife for hours, just about.
Yeah, I feel like we could do like each character in turn, the color theory according to the character.
Okay, definitely.
The character, like the whole daughter thing. Is there nothing so undoing as a daughter? Literally every daughter in the show undoes their parents to some degree. Like Caitlyn is a daughter; she undoes her senator mother. Vi and Jinx are daughters; they undo their respective fathers. Murdarda undoes her mother, which is why she was exiled.
It's weakened me.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's very, very apparent. Like getting back to Mel, her character is absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
If I'm picking a favorite in the show, it may very well be her, and it's largely because the color theory is just so in your face. Like, she wears white and gold in perpetuity, white being purity, gold being honor. And it just, she's a very
black too.
Yes, she does wear black too. And it's like, she's very,
it's very apparent.
Yes, it's very, also her red versus gold, because the Noxan red versus the gold. And so in that situation, the gold would be a representative of peace, where Noxus is a warlike nation, and they just make war because might makes right in their society. So, like, she starts off painting the Noxan ships with their red sails, but by the end of the show, she's smeared gold paint all over everything, which is representative of her break from her warlike family in the past.
We will paint the walls in gold.
Right. And so, like, her mother sent her into exile because she would undo her, and then in exile ends up undoing her because she completely forsakes the nature of her family and the name in order to cast her lot in with peace, and Piltover, and then her mother who is the Oracle character. She's the most unlikable character in the whole show, and she's meant to be unlikable, but literally everything she says is either true or comes true. So even though she's abrasive, even though she's unlikable, you have to listen to what she says, because everything she says is the truth. She's a very insightful character, abrasive and brash, but everything she says is true. Mm-hmm. And, things may have turned out differently had Jace listened to her, had her daughter listened to her.
Weapons cannot be unmade, and they are always used.
Exactly.
It's a great line.
Well, yeah, it is.
I would say Marcus is the most unlikable character personally, but that's my personal character tastes are obviously everyone's are going to be different.
Okay, let's go to what BGD says. Let's go to that. So it's going back to the beginning.
Oh, criticisms.
So BGD, right? Yes, BGD says, I really appreciate his Geekverse and his focus on positivity. That said, on rewatching the first Arcane discussion, it came across in the end as seemingly a perfect piece of filmed entertainment. Tonight, understanding that everyone considers Arcane to be generally awesome, are there aspects of the production you would explore with critique that could also be construed as fair criticism?
I replied to him in chat, and I said that I would really have to sit down and look for something.
I've got some.
Well, I don't have anything at the ready. It's likely because I'm so new to it. I've only had the one watch through, and I'm still sort of going through trying to examine it for things that I missed or things that make sense. And things that, so I would really need some time to be able to criticize effectively.
Okay. So what have you got, Sable?
Well, first off, I'll just throw in little continuity or animation errors for you. And BGD, you asked for it, but everybody here is going to hate me after I say these.
Oh, is this what you prepped me for?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So, right in the very first episode, when Powder goes and grabs the sandwich and then finds there are two sandwiches, and then she moves the blueprint to get to the hex crystals. Where's the other sandwich go? It's not there. So, so there's a continuity error. Another one.
Doug's here.
Another one. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Doug is in the chat.
Cool.
Hey, Doug, welcome.
So yeah, we've got a disappearing sandwich in the apartment in the first episode. Second episode, in the flashback when the mage appears when Jason and his mom are in the snow, all that comes into frame is his right hand holding his staff. So it's a kind of a low over the shoulder shot. Then we flip to a long over the shoulder shot from Jace's perspective, and the staff is in the mage's left hand. I don't know. That mage,
by the way, is likely Ryze, RYZE.
I've heard people say that
just because of it's portal magic, and that's his big gimmick in the game is that he does portal, and he can teleport himself as well as his whole team with him. It's a limited teleportation, but like. Who knows if it actually is, but it's neat to think that it might be.
Yeah, I've heard that. don't know anything about Rise. I don't know anything about League outside the show. So luckily it doesn't influence it doesn't influence my enjoyment of the show. But yeah, for that one, I can only offer a possible explanation that each shot was animated in 2 very different locations, and they didn't catch it until they were editing them together, and then that's too late to change it. There's another little... Okay, here's an inconsistency for you. Powder picks up 5 hex crystals. There were 6 in the box. She grabs them all. 1 drops, blows up. That starts everything. So she has 5 in her pocket. Then when she drops the backpack in episode 3, 4 of them fall out. Okay, where'd the 5th one go? Then when she goes to the cannery and she puts the crystals in the monkey bomb, she has 3 of them. She puts 2 in its body and 1 in its between its symbols. Where'd the 4th one go? We've got 2 hex crystals floating around somewhere, apparently.
Uh-oh, that's bad time.
But where'd the 5th one go? I mean,
I can't believe this is itemized by episode. Of course it is.
Of course it is. Of course
it's going to be like there's going to be something in every episode, and I'm going to have to see it now every time I watch them.
Yep. I told you you're going to hate me. Oddly enough, for as perfect as Mel is, there are 2 animation errors on her when she's talking. One in when Victor and Jace are breaking into Heimerdinger's lab, and she says that, and he's like saying Heimerdinger doesn't, something about the potential of this and about Heimerdinger seeing it, and she says he already does. It scares him. And the phoneme shape that she says for the M is actually an N. And
it's very technical. That's very technical.
This is an animator thing, okay? So the phoneme shape is the position which you put your mouth in to make a particular sound.
Yes.
And the phoneme shape for N is with your lips drawn a little bit back, your teeth a little parted, and your tongue pressing against the back of your upper row of teeth.
Right.
The phoneme shape for M is your lips are just pressed together. She, at the end of that sentence, it scares him. It scares them all. When she says it scares him, what she's actually animated saying is it scares hin.
In.
Yeah. And then later on in episode 4, again, it's on an M. And this is just a pet peeve of mine with animation. And it stood out to me because I couldn't find any other place in Arcane where this happened. But it's very common in like Saturday morning cartoon animation, what have you, where aspirated consonants, meaning like if you say pop,
right,
or hum, like where you hit the consonant at the end of the sentence and then you keep expelling air for a little bit, which means that you part your lips in order to let the air out, and you can hear it in the voice. But because of the need of producing animation every week, whatever, it's really common in cartoons or what have you that you just hit the basic phoneme, and so you'll have all sorts of aspirated consonants, P's, M's, T's, whatever, where the mouth just closes in the animation and it doesn't quite match the voice. That actually happens here with when Mel's assistant is talking with her about Jace, or talking with her about the fundraiser, and she says, "The only one worth my time is him." And she aspirates the M, and it doesn't animate the aspiration. Her mouth closes and stops.
So, Sable Phoenix, I'm going to sit here right now in this moment. I'm not an animator. This is likely not going to bother me.
Right.
And I know full well that in, a month from now when I'm watching the show again, I'm going to be sitting here cursing you.
Yep.
Because I'm going to be watching their mouths talk.
Yeah. No,
those are very technical.
This is technical stuff.
It's very technical.
But I mean, continuity errors like what did happen with the missing hex crystals? Like they just vanish. There's nothing about those. But as far as like the writing and the storytelling choices, the
Right. So
you're
BGD
getting,
says,
at
right.
that point you're getting.
BGD says, I appreciate the expertise and laser focus required to identify technical errors in continuity animation, but those are going to occur in any production. I was more interested in your constructive criticism regarding Arcane's writing and storytelling choices, as well as its characterization. That's how I took your question, BGD. Yes.
Yeah.
So, do we have those?
That was okay. Going to be the follow up.
Okay. All right. Let's go to those because you're
honestly,
right. Okay, so aside from technical errors, what would we improve from a storytelling perspective here?
I'd get rid of putting Imagine Dragons as an in canon band.
Yeah,
okay.
I get it.
I think that was unnecessary.
It was unnecessary. I get why they did it. Like Imagine Dragons has been there with Riot from the start. It was an homage to the band. I get it, but like I have never been taken out of an immersive
100%.
Experience faster than I was there with that episode. It was like, oh, okay, I guess it's an Imagine Dragons concert now.
And sadly, that's in episode 5, which otherwise, like I said, would be the perfect episode.
That was episode 5.
Yep. Yeah. That's Everybody Wants to Be My Enemy is the name of the episode, so it's the title song. Each one of the episodes is named after the song that was written for that episode. But yeah, I think that was I understand why they did it. I think it was
agree.
A bad choice.
That's a miss. That's a miss. I agree
bad
with that.
Choice. If you want to if you want to do that, make characters that represent them. Have them put their personal characters, maybe even make them champions in the game. But don't just put the look of the character designs didn't even fit, really. Like they just stood out like a sore thumb in multiple ways. Now that I've watched it so many times, I just ignore it. It just goes by. But the first time, 100%, James, I was like, wait, what? Is that Imagine Dragons?
It's
what?
like, oh my gosh, what is going on here now?
Yeah.
Hey, something occurs to me.
Go ahead.
The gems that are missing, are they missing in sequence? Go from 6, the one explodes, and we go from 5 to 4 to 3. Do we ever see 2? Because maybe it's a visual countdown to the world changing when Powder sends the monkey bomb into the warehouse.
The 3 are we do see 2 if you want to think of it that way, because the one in the symbols blows up, and then the other 2 we track individually as one goes and blows up all the shimmer and takes off Savika's arm and does all that destruction, and the other one goes through the door and kills Milo and Clagger.
Yeah, I'd have to see when that actually, like, how it lines up. But if it's a visual countdown, then I think maybe it was done intentionally. But, like, I don't know for sure. I might just be making excuses for them.
There's all sorts of, like I said, even watching through this time for this table talk, I was finding new stuff. So
yeah,
they were very meticulous, and I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that it's done on purpose, but it's not done clearly enough to make it seem like it was done on purpose. Yeah. If that makes any sense.
Well, for a future Arcane table talk, when Heath has the animators on, he can ask them that question.
There you go. once we're
maybe we get to do that.
Maybe one day.
Yes. Yeah, when we're interviewing Fortiche after they release their second season.
It seems like there's actually a lot of favor in chat for Imagine Dragons. To be clear, I actually quite like the band. I quite like their music. Yeah, it was just very it was very immersion breaking for me.
I have no problem.
TSL Frontman says,
yeah,
I loved it.
Like, I quite like the band for sure, but it was, I feel like, out of place in the in the world.
Well, TSL Frontman says it could have been worse. I mean, things could always be worse. Yes, it could always be worse.
Yes.
Is there something worse we could have thought about? Oh, yes, there's something worse.
Yeah, I like Imagine Dragons too. I always have. I know that they get a lot of hate for some reason. but I don't understand why.
I
know. Yes, it is a single explosion shown 3 times, but going to.
But they show different effects of that explosion.
We're seeing the two
different
6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Yeah.
I'm going to go through the first couple episodes and see if I can find where we see them. If they're specifically maybe they're specifically calling out a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 boom kind of account. We'll see.
That's something I hadn't thought of. So maybe
it's only just occurring to me now in the moment, and and again, it could be because I want to make excuses for them, but
maybe
we'll see, I guess.
As far as other storytelling criticisms, I think a lot of those would be based on personal taste and opinion, but Schnee, the commentator that we refer to all the time here on YouTube, who did a bunch of video essays on Arcane and who is very meticulous in his analysis, he has criticisms for Marcus as a character, as a very poor character, poorly written, and also for the scene and for the Kim Barons, Silco's interactions with the Kim Barons. That's the guy with the golden dragon jaw and the woman with the thing over her nose, and the people who try to depose him in episode 8.
The one who suffocates.
And he also has, which I can see his criticisms. I liked those scenes, but I can see why his criticisms about them have merit. I don't remember all of his critiques about those because I haven't rewatched all of his videos yet. So, but he says that Marcus, he knows what role Marcus represents and what role he plays in the story. His contention is that he is badly written for the role. And again, I'm not sure I would entirely personally agree because you're not supposed to like him, and he's not necessarily supposed to be. He doesn't have to be deep to fulfill his function, but he could have been done better. And I think that's borne out by pretty much every time I watch somebody doing like a reaction or an analysis of the show. They're all like, F Marcus, man. I'm glad he's dead, kind of thing, which makes sense. And maybe that's exactly the reaction they were going for, but they could have done it. They could have done it better. They could have made him a stronger character, because everybody else in the show is like, not what you see is what you get. By the time you've gone through, everybody has had their own episode, and the entire main cast, they all get an episode centered around them, including the city of Piltover, by the way, in episode 4, because the city of Piltover is a character in its own right.
Mm-hmm.
And they have all changed from what your initial. This is a sign of fantastic writing. They've all changed from what your initial judgment of them was, as they were originally presented. That's why, by the way, Silco is my favorite character. And right under him is Caitlin, and then right under her is Mel. But
I mean, it's hard to pick a bad one, right?
It's hard. It may be the closest thing to a perfect show you're going to find, honestly.
I need to watch it more. I need to watch it again, because I was watching other people's YouTube commentary and stuff like that for like 2 hours before we had this show and things to think about. But I'm going to watch it again. I need to watch. But so on one level, when I first watched it, to do the show with Brianna and Doug, I was just amazed. They had seen it multiple times before. Right. So they had deeper criticism and commentary. I was also sick that night. But they had criticism and commentary and stuff like that was beyond what I had, because when I watched that for the very first time, I was like, wow, I am amazed by this. And in a world where you don't get great stuff, this one is an example of getting something really amazing. And I think I want to talk about mental illness, Bacon, when we're ready. because you had brought that up. That was one of the major things that I had brought up. But so yes, we do appreciate things that we enjoy. Like we talked about Terminator 2 the other night. We talked about it because we love it. I don't know how much criticism, I can't remember, but how much criticism we might have had of Terminator 2. We certainly talked about in the context of, man, this is something that was really amazing.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like Arcane is also that way.
Yeah.
That Arcane is something really amazing and that we need to watch. So
I think it's a masterclass in visual storytelling.
I don't know. BG says it may be the closest thing to perfect, but also Terminator 2 was pretty close. I mean, Terminator 2, I don't know if I can say that because Terminator 2 was also pretty close. There's some other shows on here that we've talked about that we've really loved. That's why I don't say, if you ask Keith, what's your favorite movie, your favorite TV show, it's going to be difficult for me to come up with.
Yeah.
If you want me to actually come up with a number one, but
it's so hard, and depending on
Arcane now is up there.
Yeah, Arcane's up there. My answer to that television show question will always be Babylon 5.
Babylon 5. I've got to watch. I have not seen Babylon 5. I got to watch.
But I would put.
I've got to watch Full Metal Alchemist. Have y'all seen Full Metal Alchemist?
I'm not an anime fan, so.
Okay, well, I'm not either. But everybody's telling me I got to watch Full Metal Alchemist before I talk.
I will say this: everyone told me to watch Full Metal Alchemist, and I was not overwhelmed by the show. I don't think it was bad, but it was. There was a lot of filler, which is a typical, X episode anime sort of a thing. But it's I guess worth a watch. You just need to devote a lot of time.
Okay, well, I'm going to watch some of it before I talk to you. I'm going to watch some of it because I don't know anything about anime. So I'm going to watch that as an introduction to anime. I need a reason to do that, and that's because I got to talk to Vic. Heather is here. Heather says, "Cool lighting." What we got?
Oh, look at that!
Hey.
We've got this is absolutely physical lighting. This is all practical effects here.
Only practical effects in the Geekverse.
Over here, right? Yes, this is practical effects over here with the kerosene light here. So thank you. So BGD says I had exactly the same goading and experience with FMA, James.
Yeah, Full Metal Alchemist.
Full Metal Alchemist. Full Metal Alchemist. Oh, okay.
I will say this: if you're going to watch Full Metal Alchemist, do Brotherhood. That's widely regarded to be the better translation than just the Full Metal Alchemist, because there's two series. One is Full Metal Alchemist. One is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Brotherhood, I think, sticks closer to the manga, and that's the one that most people will tell you to watch. But yeah, I had a bit of a meh reaction to it.
Well, I know Doug was just because I talked to him after the Terminator 2 show. Doug is saying, Drew, I just started, because he was talking to me about this. I just started.
Yeah, he brought it up to me too,
and I love it. I'm on episode 9 of the first season, so Doug is a big Deep Space Nine fan now.
Take note of both Quark and Garrick throughout the series.
Yeah,
and compare them to one another. They are so incredible.
TSL Farman says, Full Metal Alchemist is one of the most popular into anime shows I see recommended by anyone. Vic was supposed to be on the show tonight again, but he had to cancel again tonight.
Oh, he does
out. Talking about this tonight. So that gives me a little bit of extra time to watch Full Metal Alchemist. So Vic has delayed until next Thursday.
Gotcha.
So it's been a 2-week delay, but he had something come up tonight that he had to do. So we delayed until next week. So that gives me a little more time because I don't know anything about anime. And I know that a lot of people, like my cousins, are really excited for me to talk to Vic because they love anime and they know him because of all of that.
Well, that's
and
cool.
I don't know anything about that. I know Star Trek Continues, so that's that side of things. But I need to watch. If I can watch some anime between now and next Thursday, that would be great. In order to understand that. So BGD says DS9 is Star Trek for storytellers, to be sure.
Agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we want to move on to other stuff, or we want to keep talking about Vi's eye color now?
No, I think we need another 3 hours on eye color.
Maybe.
At least.
Has it been 3 hours already?
Well, speaking of
No,
eyes, there's
okay.
also the Eye of Zon, and like every time that
That's-
neon eye appears, and how
Yep.
Silco is sort of, and hit. I'll get there. Hold on, I got to collect my thoughts. One of his icons is an eye, and how every time anyone's under the Eye of Zon, they always get discovered. They're always found out. So it's like it's a very much a part of the personality of the place. It also ties into eye color because it shows up in different colors. One time it's green, one time it's heterochromatic, one time it's purple. So it's like, it's just the whole color thing and eyes and eye color. It's everywhere and all over the place and really complicated, but totally worth talking about.
Has it been 3 hours already?
No, it's only been 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, one topic. No, I think we could go to a different topic. I have a topic of madness and mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
But if we want to go to that one, or if there's something else, is there something else that we want to go to first?
I'm prepared to go to madness and mental illness.
I'm good with that. I do want to also touch on Jace as Faust.
Well, do that one. Do that one.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead. Go to that one.
Do it.
So do you guys know the story of Faust?
I do know the story of Faust in the round.
In the round, okay.
Me too.
Okay, so for anybody in the chat who doesn't know the story of Faust, Faust is an academic. He is very, and it's not 100% parallels, but the imagery is specifically invoking this in Arcane. Faust is a very successful academic, but he finds his life unfulfilling. He's bored. He doesn't feel like he gets the recognition he deserves. He makes a deal with the devil to give him fame, wealth, power, all the stuff that he wants here on Earth.
Faustian bargain.
The Faustian bargain, exactly. And so the devil sends Mephistopheles. First off, I told that a little out of order. So he feels unfulfilled, and he's just going to end it all. He's going to commit suicide. So then the devil sends Mephistopheles to him and makes a bargain for wealth, fame, power, all the earthly stuff. Of course, in order to do so, he sells his soul. And depending on the version, either at the end of it, there's always the divine feminine figure. He marries somebody who's much younger than him because she gets involved in his life. She ends up being destroyed by it. She dies before he does and goes to heaven or something like that. And in one version, she intercedes for him and he strives to repent and ends up being saved. But in the original version, he's condemned. He's doomed, and is, when he dies, he goes and is enslaved by the devil in hell. So how's that correlate to Jace? Well, in the episode that we're introduced to Jace, he is he's not a successful academic, but he is an enterprising academic.
Thank you, Doug.
I know Doug did just send a super chat. Thank you, Doug. Doug sent a $10 super chat. Thank you.
Sorry,
I have to go, but just wanted to say, Heath, James, Sable, you all are awesome. Keep up the great work, gentlemen. Arcane season 2 due out in November 2024. So that'll be an epic thing. That'll be an epic thing around here, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, oh for sure.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Doug. Thank you very much, Doug.
We missed you.
I'm sorry.
Wanted
Go
to
ahead.
be on the-
Sable. Yes.
So yeah,
but thank you, Doug.
Jace is a enterprising and respected academic. I mean, he's a protege of Heimerdinger himself, apparently. But when it's all taken away from him, he figures, well, there's nothing left to live for, so he attempts to commit suicide. This would cast Victor into the role of Mephistopheles, who interrupts him, saves his life, offers him, hey, you know, I never had anybody to believe in me. I just believed in myself, and I think your Hextech dream has a way of changing the world, so I'll tell you how to make it happen. And successfully they do, and it catapults Jace into the top scientist of Piltover, right? And then we start getting imagery. So in that's at the end of episode 3, is when the bargain is struck, essentially. Because it's like, oh no, this is my new partner. Episode 4, we get that same fundraiser I was talking about earlier that Mel Medarda is holding. And it's interesting how from this point on, how often Jace, no other character, none of the other main characters have this happen, how often he's surrounded by fire when he's introduced. So he, and interestingly, when Mel is saying, the only one worth my time is him, her assistant says, well, speak of the devil. And in through the brazier, through the flames of the brazier in the middle of the room, which flare up and then part in the middle, we reveal Jace walking into the room. This imagery is then repeated, and the fire imagery like that occurs at points where Jace could have made a different path and potentially even diverted a lot of what happens throughout the series, and where he ends up always making the wrong choice. The next time we do that is at the bridge barricade, where they've held Victor after coming back from seeing Singed and getting the shimmer, and Jace comes up and he's like, you know how this looks? I set up a blockade and my own partner violates it, and yada yada. And then he's like, well, you didn't say they were from the other city. They have their little argument. As they're walking away, one of the rioters from the Undercity throws a Molotov cocktail, and the camera's on the bridge, and it lands right in front of the camera, right on Jace. Again, boom, flames out to the sides, and then falling away from him in the middle as he turns and looks back at it. There's also the third major time that we see Jace through flames is when Vi is convincing him to attack Silco's operations in the forge room. And the camera is inside the forge looking out at him at one point. And again, each of these are situations where he could have changed the course of the downward spiral if he just had a little bit more of a backbone. So I haven't seen anybody anywhere, no commentary, no essays, nothing, no analysis anywhere, make that connection of Jace to Faust. But it's, to me, obvious. I thought it was very interesting.
That is interesting. No, I had not seen that either.
Yeah, Jace, he's an interesting character as well. He, for the most part, makes the vast majority of his decisions from a place of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And those always end up being the wrong decisions.
Well, he goes full speed at whatever he thinks the goal, the best goal or the best outcome is, until he reaches any resistance, and then he just goes full speed in the opposite direction.
Yep. Oh, that wasn't it. Wasn't it.
Yeah.
Like very ping-pongy.
Yeah. Up until the very end, when he recognizes that the Mel was right the whole time. But anyway, what was the mental illness aspect you wanted there?
Well, so James had brought this up before, and it's actually mentioned just mental illness in passing very early on in this conversation
with
and I don't
manic episode
with Powder, with regard to Powder, right? And I don't think that we had talked about this at all in our last discussion of this series. And so I thought that it was worth bringing up the idea of madness and a madness arc. because Brianna has like talked about this. When we're talking about arcs of the fall, you know, throughout the discussion through multiple episodes on this show, we've talked about the differences, especially Brianna, about differences of the fall or a madness arc, or I forgot, but madness was one of them. And so here we are sitting with the idea of madness, and it's often the case, like when we're talking about that madness is equated to mental illness, and therefore something we shouldn't talk about. That the portrayal of first of all, I thought that if there is a difference between madness and mental illness, we should talk about it. And then how do you manifest this idea of madness? Because even in role-playing games today, when you're talking about something, Lovecraftian with the Call of Cthulhu RPG, you can talk about going, a descent into madness. And it's very common in role-playing games today for there to be some kind of warning or disclaimer before you play that game about, now, you're about to talk about somebody going insane, but be sure that you don't, stigmatize a real mental illness. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's basically the idea. Be sure that you don't, parody or stigmatize a real mental illness as you're going. But what does it mean to go mad? And so Brianna was addressing that when she was talking about madness arcs, although she's still developing it, but that idea was there.
Yes.
But then here we also have this idea of Powder / Jinx going, let's use the word mad, going mad as you watch her descent. How is that different, if it is from being mentally ill? And what does a madness arc mean? I think that's an important conversation to have.
I think it is too, but I think with specific regard to Powder and Jinx, and this is something that Sable made me aware of, the very first shot of the series is through Jinx's eyes.
Yeah.
And the very first person that we see is a Piltover guard or police officer who is then, he has a sort of a vicious, violent neon face imposed over top of his own mask.
Yeah.
Really easy to miss. And it's really easy to attribute to a child's imagination. But I think that it's genuine evidence of a mental illness. So I think that while Powder is driven to madness, I think that she starts off mentally ill.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, and this is something that, again, this is something that Sable Phoenix brought to my attention. I did not land on this on my own, and I want to make sure he gets the proper credit for it.
No worries. It's not something that it's not something that I exclusively noticed either. A lot of other people have commented on it too. But it's in a lot of cases too, though. I mean, how young is Powder there? She's like 4, something like that. Maybe 5.
In the initial scene?
In the initial opening sequence.
Yeah, well, she's also
she's also in the middle.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
She's in the middle of a traumatic experience. She's in the middle of a war zone.
Yes.
I mean, there's nothing more traumatic than a war zone.
I was just about to bring up the fact that when she sees her mother's body, her face is already tear-streaked, but she does not cry.
Yeah,
she's so incredibly numbed in that moment for being in a war zone. I mean, she's singing a song to calm herself down.
And covering her eyes.
Song. So, she's already in a bad spot.
And when she does see her dead parents, she looks at Vi to find out how to react too, which is a kind of heartbreaking in its own right. And then she doesn't. And then when Vi collapses to her knees and she's sobbing, that's when she's like, "Oh well, okay, I'll comfort you now." Like this is why I'm sad, is because you're sad. It's not because like she just saw some guy get blown away by that enforcer. You know, she's like, oh, my parents are dead too. Well, I mean, look at all the dead people. I don't know how to process that.
Well, and she just watched Vander likely punch a guy to death.
Oh yeah. That enforcer
away.
did not survive several cast iron gauntlets to the face either. So yeah, there's all this horrific violence all over the place. And it's totally, I mean, what is shell shock? You know, or what we call now PTSD, or whatever. It's battle fatigue, PTSD, whatever you want to call it. You've been through trauma and it affects your mental state.
Yes. And
the younger you are, the more it's like the Jesuits always said, give me a child until he is 6 and I will give you the man. If you go through something that traumatic that young, it's very, very unlikely that you're going to get rid of it. So
yeah, and I really think
is it 6 of one, half a dozen of the other? Maybe she was already vulnerable to it, but at the same time, it could just be that she's that young in a war zone, and that was enough to set the whole thing up in the first place.
Yeah, I think that it's just a perfect storm of a tragedy.
Yeah,
because the fact that she is predisposed toward the tragedy, she's predisposed toward not handling it well, is and I say, not handling it well, that's a bit of a loaded statement. She has a loaded reaction, and I think that it was just the perfect mind to be caused to break like that because of all of the trauma that she's been put through. Like, she could have turned out differently had things not gone in that direction.
Oh, for sure.
And it's a very tragic sort of thing. I think that it. Who mentioned it? I think it was. Is it TSL Frontman? Someone mentioned that it ends up adding a measure of sympathy to her character and what happens at the end, and I completely agree.
Well, is that here? TSL Frontman says, I think it does a great note of pointing that illness is literally not black and white. It doesn't matter to her if she's mentally ill or not. She is what she is, broken and unsure of what is wrong. That first perspective, Sean,
well,
is that what you were talking about?
That's a good point too, because of so much of the things that the dialogue that she has at the end of episode 9 is super important. It's a weird thing to say, I really thought I buried this place, but nope, nothing ever stays dead. That's a weird thing to say.
That's a very important quote, yes.
But to her,
it's a super important quote.
It's 100% true, right? Milo and Clagger are dead, but no, not that they're not. She hears them in her head every day. Vi, she thought, was dead, but she even says, you never left. I always heard you.
Mm-hmm.
You're the reason I'm still alive. Pushing me when all the colors are black. You're the reason I'm still alive.
It was actually Tim Haldane that said, he said, I think Arcane does a fairly decent job of making Jinx Powder's struggles with psychosis sympathetic. Yeah, I misspoke.
Right here, Tim.
Yeah.
I think Arcane.
Yeah, not that we have to sidetrack back onto that. I just wanted to make sure that I got the quote.
Yeah, I mean, that's
okay, Tim. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, 100% it does, because you see the whole, you see the causes, you see the whole progression.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess I was trying to distinguish between a situation where somebody isn't mentally well for some reason, and that you are parodying it, or using it as something like, whereas somebody genuinely going mad, if there is a distinguish between these two things. And like Schnee on that YouTube channel did give a breakdown of different phases that you go through if you're going to have a character go mad. Because on that channel, it was a breakdown between how Powder to Jinx did that right, and then how in the Game of Thrones, Daenerys did that wrong. He's got a comprehensive breakdown on that and different kinds of steps that you have to go through.
Yeah.
In order to say, hey, because there's something that's weird to me that says like that. I guess it's something psychological. We've been kind of playing with this idea throughout a bunch of different discussions here on Table Talk, that you have the idea of archetypes that show up psychologically and that or are psychological to us, and so they show up in a variety of different stories. And this idea of someone going mad seems like one of them. Like the Joker in the Batman, the Dark Knight Returns, or the Dark Knight, the second Batman with Christian Bale.
Well, the Joker is famous for Batman had he reacted differently.
Right.
Like
That
they
Batman
both had
could have
one
gone
that
mad.
day. Yeah.
Yes, right. So I don't think that it's something where you can just reduce, oh my God, you're talking about madness, so you're kind of parodying some kind of mental illness and you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. But I think that this idea of madness,
like a psychotic break.
There's something that we can show and deal with directly in stories, and it might have been done very well, for instance, here in Jinx, and then also in Batman for the Joker, whereas it wasn't done well, for instance, with Daenerys in Game of Thrones. But that this is an going mad seems to be one of those archetypes that we have, and I don't want to lose that. On the idea that don't show mental illness, because is madness mental illness? What we're showing Jinx go through.
Question. Right. I would like cursorily gut reaction from the hip. I would say that no, madness is not mental illness. I would have obsession. I would have to like really kind of dive into like madness would be the result of a psychotic break. What causes a psychotic break? Human psychology involved. Way too complicated for me to be able to get into without doing any measure of reading or research first. But my initial reaction is that they are not the same, that they are different, and that I think that they can both be handled in a way that's perfectly valid and maybe not always inoffensive, but worth exploring as a part of the human condition, both seriously and humorously. I think that there's room for both. I think that all aspects of the human condition are worth exploring. And I think that it helps us understand ourselves more. It helps us understand each other more. You just like, even with the humor, well, I think I can stop there. I'll just stop there.
Well, we could, like, there was a list that Schnee put in that video about characteristics of madness. And I don't think it's worth going through all of them, but he was talking about some things that were missing from Daenerys that are present in Jinx and so forth, and then even when the element is present in both of them, how it was done well in one and not well in another. But what the final one that he brings up is a moment of agency. That if you're mentally unwell, then arguably, according to one conceptualization, you won't ever have a moment of agency about your choice of your destiny. But he specifically called out moment of agency as something that is an important part of going mad, which at that point is when you have some kind of decision to make, and then you decide to go over the brink. And I suppose, as Adrian Smedley would say, doubling down on your flaw.
Yeah.
Right.
That now I'm going into that and I'm doubling down on that. So an agentive descent, and because I think you would have that, for instance, if you were writing that with the Joker in The Dark Knight, that you would probably, if you were trying to develop his complete origin story, you would probably have a situation where he could have gone one way or he could have gone the other, and he decided to go one way.
Yeah.
And now then you end up with a madness arc that isn't just mental illness. So I wonder if that is an important component of the division of those things.
Yeah, and I think like mental illness encompasses a spectrum of different conditions. And again, this is my absolutely total layman take without doing any reading or research whatsoever. So pardon me if I misspeak, but I mean, mental illness feels like it's an umbrella term.
Yeah.
And madness is like specific. While it can be caused by a lot of things, it usually involves like a list of items, like Schnee would have said, like very specific things. I would think, like a common phrase would be descent into madness. So like you start off as mentally typical and then descend into a mad state, or something changes, or you experience a certain series of events or thought processes, or who knows, violence. I'm sure violence can cause it. Like there's any number of things that can cause it, but it feels like madness is something that you transition into from a state of normalcy, whereas mental illness is not that.
Okay, I want to bring up what Tim says, because Tim says madness, and I think I think what Tim is saying right here is the reason why there is opposition to the term. I think Tim says madness is a very sloppy and imprecise term. It's an old shorthand for mental illness that puts ignorance and lack of empathy front and center. Lack of empathy for the sufferer. And I do understand that. I do.
Yeah, for sure.
I completely agree. So I think that's why some people are very against any type of depiction of madness or madness arc or that kind of thing, because they would say, listen, this is a sloppy and imprecise term. If I'm understanding madness in the context of 1850s psychology,
Yes.
let's say, okay, then right, the term madness would be very encompassing. That person went mad. That's a very encompassing term. It's probably sloppy from our modern psychological perspective.
Yes.
It's probably imprecise from our modern psychological perspective. But that doesn't necessarily mean to me that, but so then that would go that since it was sloppy and imprecise in the 1850s, let's say, that we shouldn't, that going mad is not something that we should talk about or depict in stories today, because you're being you might be insensitive to people with mental illness. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So what does it mean today if you're saying, listen, I want to depict a madness arc? And arguably Powder to Jinx does that.
Yes.
And then you could say, have they done something wrong? They've depicted a madness arc. So if you're saying like madness, oh my God, if you're showing madness, you're misunderstanding mental illness. Has Arcane done something fundamentally wrong in its depiction of madness and Jinx?
Have you ever seen In the Mouth of Madness with Sam Neill?
I have not. No.
Okay. So In the Mouth of Madness depicts a character. He goes mad. He has a psychotic break by the end of the film. Like, I'm talking full on padded cell, writing on the walls. But he begins the film as a very mentally typical character. I don't think that people, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that people would necessarily have an issue with the way that madness is depicted in that film. I think that the issue, especially with Powder and Jinx, is that she starts off with a measure of mental illness. And the worry is that there's going to be some sort of conflagration between, or not they're going to confuse one for the other, is what I'm trying to say.
Conflation?
Yes, my big words are failing me. But there's going to be there's like an element of confusion that's presented as a result of there being this element of mental illness along with her psychotic break, which are, in my opinion, pretty well distinct from one another and pretty identifiably distinct within the context of the story. But, I don't necessarily know, because I don't think in that direction. I think that it's okay to explore the human condition. And that's just me. Like,
and
that's me. You don't want to be a jerk about it.
No. But what I'm asking is the condition of being mad an archetypical human condition? I guess that's what I'm asking.
100% yes.
100. Yeah, I agree with that.
So we all here would say yes.
Yes.
And that's not the same as being mentally ill.
Correct. Agree.
Okay. So I was actually, as I was watching this, I was going, oh my God, as I was watching Schnees and taking video and taking notes on that, I was like, oh my God, there's a character that I have here. And actually, I need to depict him as going mad. He needs to be a hero. And it's not like the different kinds of arcs that Brianna talks about with that, but that needs to be a madness arc. By the time he ends up, he needs to be mad by the time he ends this. Which doesn't mean something like what's the word I'm looking for? Well, in any variety of mental illnesses that we have that somebody could be diagnosed with, schizophrenia. Like, for instance, it doesn't necessarily mean, I'm not saying that because he ends up mad, he's got schizophrenia.
Right. And you're not saying that someone with schizophrenia is mad.
Is mad in this context.
Right.
Even though, as Tim was saying, 150 years ago, someone with schizophrenia may have been labeled imprecisely and generally with this title, mad.
Yeah.
They're mad. What is this archetype? Yeah.
Well, and I think that what has allowed the differentiation to present is our ability to explore the different conditions within story and within fiction. Like, obviously there's also real world medicine that's furthered that, but human beings are we're predisposed to tell stories. Like, how was your day today at work? That's a story. You tell a story. You tell it over the dinner table. That's what happens when you go over someone's house to play a board game or to meet someone at a restaurant. You talk and you tell each other stories. That's how we include each other in our lives. That's how we come to understandings about things. I am very, very pro story, to a point where I might say that stories are the most important things humans can do to understand each other and relate to one another.
Yeah, I totally agree with that statement.
Well,
yeah, so
I guess
stop there.
Yeah, if you've got multiple, I guess I was thinking in terms of this, if you've got multiple characters and you have one who becomes corrupt. Okay, that's one arc you'd have, from kind of a good guy to a bad guy. They got corrupted. Whether or not fall is one of those we've talked about extensively on this channel, but then madness would be another one. Like, from good guy to mad would be a different story from good guy to corrupt.
Yeah, 100%.
And you could have both of those as villains, but they are going to look very different in the story.
You could do both in the same character at the same time.
Well, you could have both in the same character, but they're different things that you're dealing with.
I mean, arguably, that is what we see with Jinx.
Yeah, and to springboard off that, Shirley is asking in chat, James, are you saying because Jinx is mentally ill, her response to the trauma is symptomatic of her illness?
Oh, right here.
Yeah, I don't think I'm saying that. I think that what I'm trying to say, and maybe failing, is that the fact that she is likely starting the story off with a measure of mental illness is, it doesn't define her reaction. I'm not saying that because she's mentally ill, she's destined to react in this way. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that because she is mentally ill, it is likely exacerbating the trauma. I think that's what maybe I'm still ineffectively communicating it. But
mental illness is not insanity, right?
No.
So mental illness, one of the things about mental illness that I personally disagree with. So even though I went and studied animation, I've worked in health in natural health for most of my life.
With your mom, right? I think you've mentioned.
Yeah, I did some with my mom. I did with other people, and counseling and emotional therapy is part of that. And one of the things that I disagree with about mental illness is the idea that it's just a chemical imbalance, and we can medicate that. When in reality, mental illness is. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to say 100% of the time, but most of the time, the significant component of mental illness, as we would call it, is emotional trauma, which is exactly what Jinx is going through.
Yeah.
And I find her response is very, what's the word I would want to use? I find her responses, truthful, I guess. We'll just use the simple word.
I think.
Because this goes back to the animation as well. There are significant scenes, and sometimes it's just a few. It's just a few different things or a few different instances in one scene, but there are significant. Okay, I'll cite a couple specific ones. The scene where Jinx is punching and doing the boxing arcade machine is one, where she loses time. As we're flashing into the flashbacks and all the scribbles and scratches all over the screen, it's because she's caught in what one of the people I work with, one of my mentors, called a trauma vortex, where you get back into the same emotional response that you had in that similar situation before, and you start replaying what happened previously. And that whole sequence when she's fighting the machine is animated to take about 20 seconds, I think, something around there. When she comes out of it and she does the last punch and and hits the scoreboard, she's crying, she's sweating, she's panting so hard she can't catch her breath. She's been at this for a long time, and it went by in seconds. I think that's very accurate. This also happens when she's talking with Silco after the firelight attack on the smuggling blimp, and she's playing with the eye injector thing and talking about Vi, and it's just like these jump cuts as it's like a film. It's like a record scratch, and she's in a different position, and then like a record scratch, and she's in another position doing something completely different. Like she's literally missing. Her memories are going back to the previous trauma, and they're not even recording what she's doing in the present. It was the same thing was happening when she was hanging on to the actual Firelight Girl's hand on the blimp, right? She was frozen in place. That one we actually saw the time passing. She was frozen in place in her mind. Time in the real world wasn't passing. She was back in the past. That's what trauma does. That's what mental illness, that's what PTSD or whatever else you want to call it. That's what mental illness does. It's these emotional whirlpools that you get stuck in. I thought it felt very genuine.
Yeah, Tim says authentic might be the word.
Authentic. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you, Tim.
Oh.
I don't know why I couldn't think of that. Yes, exactly. It's authentic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want to, I hope I'm not coming across as like insensitive or prejudicial with regard to mental illness. I think that if Jinx found herself in a different set of circumstances with people who recognized the issue and cared for her in a way that she needed to be cared for, I think that she could have made a different decision. So
for sure.
I don't want to come across like what I'm saying is well, of course she made that decision. She was mentally ill. That is not even remotely what I'm trying to communicate. I might just be, and hey, maybe I'm communicating effectively and I'm just worried that I'm communicating it poorly. But
yeah, I think you're overthinking it. It's
okay. All right. I don't want to come across in such a way that seems or is insensitive or not compassionate.
And Arcane doesn't either. It's very clear that the results of Jinx's actions and decisions were products of what was done to her by the system, right? This is like I said earlier, Piltover, the city of Piltover itself, represented by the council, is a character.
Yes,
It is the biggest monster in the entire show. Everyone in the show is a monster in one way or the other, but the biggest one is Piltover, represented by the council and the enforcers. Actually, they are its eyes and its teeth, and that's why it's a tragedy, because it could have gone differently. But like any good tragedy, it feels inevitable. Like we see all the ways it could have gone differently, but it couldn't have gone differently. Right?
Yes, I 100% agree with that. That's what makes it tragic. Is that under a different set of circumstances, there could have been a happy ending, but just perfect storm just wouldn't let it happen.
Here's an idea: you could have a villain who is mad. We have a mad villain in a movie without having to go through the madness arc. And we didn't talk about this, but I think it applies when we talked about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. When they discover Khan on the planet, I think arguably Khan is a madman.
Yep. I completely agree.
So we didn't see Khan's madness arc.
Right.
But he's a very different character than he was in Space Seed.
He was different than he was on Space Seed, and by the time you show up, like, what type of villain is this? Khan is a madman. But it also shows you, even if you just watch episode or the movie 2, the Wrath of Khan, why, as a result, he may have gone mad. So actually, I want to think more about that as I go. That Khan, as a madman, is he mentally ill? I think actually this is probably a fantastic example of a place when you're talking about, is Khan mentally ill?
No, I don't think
probably
so.
No. Yeah. Khan
not.
is not a mentally ill person. He's very capable. He maintains all of his mental faculties. He doesn't have any type of mental illness but yet he is mad.
Yeah, I would say in the literary sense.
In the literal sense,
I would say no.
Tim says, I mean, he's wrathful, so yeah, he's mad.
Well,
okay,
sure. No, but in the literary sense, madness means obsession.
Yes,
it means an overriding drive that. I mean, it's a drive that overrides everything, even to the point of self-destruction.
Yeah, Captain Ahab.
Yeah, 100%. In that sense, I actually don't think that Jinx is a mad character.
Really?
Well, I mean, you could say, I mean, she's obsessed over her. No, I don't think so. Like, you could say potentially that she starts that direction with Vi being the obsession, but by the end, she steps completely back from that.
That depends on whether or not you would allow other things other than obsession to inhabit that space. I would have to think about whether or not I would.
Yeah,
Well, is the Klingon commander in 3? Is he mad? Christopher, what's his name? I'm sorry, the main Klingon bad guy.
Lloyd.
3.
Christopher
Lloyd. Christopher. Yes, Lloyd.
Krug, right?
Krug. Is he portraying a mad character in Star Trek 3? To me, there's a distinction between what Khan is and what he is in 3.
Yeah, there's a difference between madness and just being driven.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Yes, because we don't want to say just if it's obsession. They like, in the context of that story, Krug or Krieg or whichever it is in Star Trek 3 is after the Genesis project, so he's definitely driven toward it. but he doesn't come across as mad to me in
No.
this context, and this uses the word the way Khan is. You fought a mad villain in Star
because
Trek.
Khan is like at all costs.
Right.
Um,
Even to the point of self-destruction, as long as you accomplish whatever it is that the object of your madness might be.
From Hell's Heart, I spit my last breath at thee. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like you will absolutely self-destruct in pursuit of your obsession.
Yeah. As long as you gain whatever it is that you're... So maybe it's not just obsession. I don't know any other word that it could be.
Well,
or any other function.
As long as it
results in the... As long as it whatever it is, it has to result in the character destroying himself, right? Or to have the potential for the character to destroy himself if he continues to pursue it at that level. The opportunity might never occur, but where whatever that thing is so important to that character that it overrides every other concern. That's madness, literally speaking. I would propose. And I don't think I believe that Jinx approaches that. You could say it starts off with Vi, then it shifts potentially to Caitlyn. But by the tea party, when she sits down in the Jinx chair, not only has the reason she was flirting, she was spiraling around that madness drain was because Powder hadn't died yet. Once she's Jinx, whole and true, she's no longer mad. She honors Silco's wish. She pulls out Fishbones. She nukes the council in complete clarity of mind, even though it's in complete emotional pain as well. So
I got that quote wrong. I confused him. It's from Hell's Heart I stab at thee for hate sake.
Right. Well, we knew what you meant. We knew what scene you're talking about.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's, again, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm just looking at it from the archetypal.
So if no longer mad, what? If she's no longer mad by the end,
Now she's just a trickster. She's a loose cannon. She is the trickster. She's the trickster archetype, and her this is her villain origin story. Now she's a full-on trickster. She's the Joker. She's totally mentally clear and does it because you can't control me. I'm outside of the rules.
Okay.
And I've earned it. It's like I've been through whatever it is that put me here. Because of that, the rules don't apply to me. That's what I think, at least. What do you think?
I don't know. I need to give it more thought. I this is a sort of topic that I would really need to consider over the course of some time. I think I agree with you. I think that there is a psychotic break, but then I think she does reach clarity by the end. And she reaches clarity in that moment.
In the moment when she shoots Silco.
Yeah, she achieves her agency. She pulls the trigger. So on that, we agree. But what then?
Well, that's what season 2 is about.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess by what then, what I'm asking is what could we identify her as? Just maniacal villain? That doesn't seem fair. It also maybe doesn't seem accurate.
No, she's not maniacal.
Well, she's not, but I don't know. I guess, I mean, you're right. I think what we need to do is just wait for season 2 to see how she behaves. To see what she's turned into.
The whole point of this season was getting to that point of now. Yeah. Okay, now what? It's like
the whole show. She was fighting for that clarity. She never had the clarity. She was fighting for the clarity. Finally, she gets her clarity. She gains her agency. She makes her own decisions, whether it be to honor Silco or to continue, whatever. We can differ on that. But there's 100% clarity achieved. And the clarity is achieved via the now discount of approval from others. She doesn't care if she has the approval of anyone. She doesn't care if she has the approval of Silco. She doesn't care. She has the approval of Zahn writ large, or her sister, or anyone.
She's finally embraced what makes her different, makes her strong. Fully embraced it. And she was the whole tea party was assembled to test Vi about whether Vi would apply that no strings attached, and Vi failed, and that's why she chose Jinx. Even though she reacted to save Vi, and you look at it like the bullet even hit the shoulder of Vi's jacket when Sable fired at her. I do. Right. There's another thing. I have a little bit of a problem with that because they kind of cheated in that scene. They broke the 180-degree rule in order to make it ambiguous whether or not Jinx shot Vi or Silco. So there's another criticism I could have, BGD. They were cheating on that last scene quite a bit. They also cheated with the moon, and it confused people. It's like, why is it so big and they're walking straight towards it and the rocket's flying straight towards it when it's actually off to the right? Like they're not playing by the rules, but they're doing that for an emotional response.
Yeah, Chris Nolan does the thing, and I really get on his back.
Yeah, and I don't like it I don't like it when you cheat for the emotion. When the show is already running on such high emotion, you don't got to cheat to give us more. Right. But anyway, where was I going with that?
Well, I think we're trying to identify Jinx.
What brought her to clarity? What brought her to clarity was she was in.
Well, it was a realization, because that's usually what brings someone to clarity. But like, what did she realize? What was it? What clicked?
It wasn't a realization consciously, because she was in the middle of. Vi thought she was helping her, saying, "Picture Milo, picture Clagger, Mom, Dad, me."
She was condemning her, and she didn't realize it.
Exactly, and so she's got all of the mental monsters all coming out at once, which is what, by the way, going back to my emotional support and counseling work and all that kind of stuff. The reason that trauma persists is because you don't allow it is because you suppress it.
Right. You don't.
And if you suppress it, then you can never move through it. You can never move past it. It's always the now to your subconscious mind. And that's what's happening to Jinx in that scene.
So she was overloaded.
She was overloaded.
She's being 100%.
Overloaded. She was in the middle of a trauma vortex.
Okay, so then was it truly a psychotic break then? Was that, is she mad? Is it truly a psychotic break from having been overloaded?
No, what?
That just appears like clarity, because, I mean, a break can look like anything. A break can look like complete calm.
No, but what pulls her out of it? It's the tink of the hammer of her gun that Silco picks up. And with that, it snaps her out of the vortex, and without even thinking about it, she shoots at that sound and kills Silco to save Vi. Because despite the fact that she's in a trauma vortex, it's still her blood. And then the result of it, Silco says, "You're Jinx," in parentheses, "You're perfect. I would never have given you to them. You're perfect."
Mm-hmm.
And she finally, her realization is at that moment, now I am alone. My sister failed the test, even though I will always choose her. She failed the test, and now my father's dead.
I think it's more than just alone. It's now I am alone again at my own hand again. Because the whole time she's been torturing herself for having killed her family. And now she's faced with having done it again.
But yes, 100%, she's done it again. But for the first time, she also acknowledges that she is Jinx. 100%, no reservations. What makes me different is what makes me strong. This whole time, when her eyes were blue, she was fighting that. It's like, Powder fell down a well. It's not, stop calling me that. It's Jinx now. Powder fell down a well.
Powder fell down a well, yeah.
This is that whole vacillation back and forth, that constant war. Now at this point, once her eyes are purple and once she has cried out the shock of killing her father again for the second time, that's done. Again, remember, she looks up, look her with that dead expression, and the voices go off. We hear them whispering in her head, and she doesn't fight them. She doesn't argue with them. Whatever they tell her to do, she just gets up and goes to the chair and sits down. And that's when she says, I thought you could still love me like you used to, even though I'm different. But you changed too, which is also a very interesting line and weird. So here's the new us. It's the dialogue is so deep in that scene, man.
It is, and I'd have to consider it a bit more. I think it may be a little ambiguous. Maybe it's intentionally ambiguous.
I think Tim's making a good point here.
I think he is too. Her entire life, she's been punished for trying to be good.
Oh no! And her just accepting what life's been telling her. She's a jinx. Everything she is going to destroy whatever it is that she loves, and so.
Yeah, but see, that could still be a psychotic break. And that's my I guess what I'm wrestling with here is like, did she truly achieve clarity or did she truly break? And I think that there's intentional ambiguity there, and I'm okay with it being ambiguous. I'm okay with there being two possible interpretations.
Oh yeah. I mean, Schnee himself has a video on that scene and has two different possible interpretations, and different than the ones we're talking about right now. So,
okay, all right. Well, I'll have to watch that because I haven't seen all of Schnee's material. I'm actually currently going through it.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's over 12 hours of video that he made just on a show that's 6 hours long, I think.
Oh my God, that sounds like table talk.
Yeah. I wonder why we all like him so much.
15 hours on a 2-hour movie.
Well, is there any other? What other major topics do you have in your notes that we need to address? I mean, have we covered the topics at least until season 2 comes out? We get a lot coming out in the future. Like with Dune 2, with the House of the Dragon, we got Arcane. Man, this could be a major year here. When do we get Schnee on table? I don't know. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, contact him. Say, hey, bro.
Awesome.
Maybe we should reach out. In fact, I'll make a note on that. I don't know. Maybe we should reach out.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
We're kind of an island unto ourselves out here, but you're right. Maybe we should reach out to people. All right, I made a note of that. But is there anything else that you guys have that are major notes that we should be covering?
Like a billion million
on this show, that's always going to be yes. But if we're at a good stopping point,
yeah. But I think at this point, it's more like piecemeal. It's more like, well, let's do a character analysis on Mel, or let's do a character analysis on Jace, like from start to finish. And we haven't talked about Heimerdinger. We haven't really talked about Echo. Echo is like so he's the only one, right? So he comes from a broken family, right? But he's the only one that comes from a diverse family that we see on camera. He's probably not the only one in the world, but he's the only character that we see. So, like, of course, he's the one that assembles a family by bringing in everyone who is downtrodden or forgotten, or it just like there are so many things that we could discuss, but they're all kind of pocketed and in my view anyway. And I haven't had a second viewing of the show yet, so I could come up with something else. Who knows? But in this moment, as it stands, I am satisfied.
Okay.
Each episode could have its own separate table talk, discrete from all the others, and each character, and then each pairing of characters. That's another. Everybody, if they haven't seen it already, should go watch Shani's 1-year anniversary video about Arcane because he talks about what he calls their great layering technique or something similar, which I've kind of mentioned elsewhere. How everything refers to everything else. Like you can point to the characters and their relationships, and they're all mirrored by another relationship somewhere else with just one little thing different, you know. So you could go, I mean, there's endless comparisons you could keep making. I think I said in the chat with when you were talking about Arcane with Doug and Brianna that it's not necessarily that it's a deep show so much as that it's very it's just that it's got so many layers.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like that's what we want out of different movies and things like that. Every movie or TV show that has been like that, I mean, spawns great table talk conversations, in depth, long table talks, table talks that are in depth, that go deep. I mean, I guess that's what that means, to be in depth. I wish there were more things like that.
Yeah, for sure. Me too.
Yeah,
that's why Arcane stands so tall, especially amidst the creative and philosophical desert that is media in our current, decade. It's in and of itself, it's high quality and high art, but it's also in the middle of a desert, so it looks even better by comparison.
Sure is.
All right.
In the middle of a desert, I mean.
Well, all right. We'll keep going. I'm not sure what Tuesday we're going to be talking about, but I think Doug and Brianna have been texting me back and forth about stuff, and I think there are about 18 different text messages about what we could possibly talk about on Tuesday. So I'm not sure what that is. So
is Breaking Bad on the list? I brought that up earlier in the show. That'd be worth talking about.
I'm not even sure. Let me.
I mean, not that that's one of the topics they're considering discussing.
That wouldn't be Tuesday, but Breaking Bad, I will see if Breaking Bad is on this list. I got this TV shows.
As far as animation goes,
Breaking Bad is on the list. Breaking Bad is on the list. So, I mean, there are also, about 70 other things on the list.
Yeah.
But Breaking Bad is on the list.
As far as animation goes, I know I've suggested, I don't know if it's on the list, but Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is fantastic.
We did talk about that one, and that one I believe is on the list someplace here. And we actually thought about covering it earlier, but it seemed because of it just being Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Yeah, that's on the list.
Okay.
It didn't make a first cut.
Right.
To talk about like things like Fight Club, Dune, Star Trek, The Fellowship of the Ring made a first cut.
Gotcha.
But, yeah, there.
Is there a schedule on when you'll be discussing the Lord of the Rings read through with Brianna?
But I need to get that out. I know I was actually thinking about that because I got about 17 or 18 text messages from Doug and Brianna about what we need to do next. And I would like to get a schedule out about when we need to do reading Paradise Lost, The Fellowship of the Ring, Doug's book, Cameron's book. There are a few things that I would like to nail down. I believe this is episode 77, Brianna's book. I believe this is episode 77, and I'd like to go to 100, and then before a complete reevaluation of whatever it is that we've done here.
Sure.
But that means that we need to think about, like, in the next 24 episodes or something like that, what do we really want to cover? And I would really like to cover things like The Fellowship of the Ring from both the movie and the film perspective, the movie and the book perspective, Doug's book, Brianna's book, those kinds of things. So, there's no schedule right now, but I want to bring that up when I next can text message everybody, because we need to do that. We need to think about, if there were only 100 episodes of Table Talk, what we want to cover in the next 23 or so. Yeah. And I'll let everybody
500 hours of media. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Also, I want to call out, going way back to the whole Faust discussion, Drudenfutz put a note that if Jace is Faust and Victor is Mephistopheles, wouldn't that make Mel into Gretchen? who is
I saw
Faust's
that.
wife.
Yes, I saw
Yeah,
that
yeah.
earlier. Yeah,
That's a very good point, and yes, absolutely would have to be. Also, because going back to eye color, there are 4 characters that have gold eyes in the film. They are Jace, Victor, Mel, and can anyone guess who the 4th one would be?
You said Jace, Victor, and
Is it
Mel?
Mel's mom?
No, it's actually Sky.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Sky Young.
You know what's funny about that is that when I showed my friend, she teaches about film in Britain, when I showed her one of the posters, she saw Mel in the upper right-hand corner, kind of right behind Silco. She literally drew a circle around her and said, "Does this character have gold eyes?" I was like, "Wow, you can pick him out a mile." Yeah, she's extremely astute with regard to specifically color theory. That's why I put it in front.
We should have her on Table Talk.
I'll ask her. I'm sure she'd love to. And you know what? She is actually just getting into Dungeons and Dragons, and she's sort of like over the moon with how, or role playing, I should say, not Dungeons and Dragons, but she's over the moon with how accepting the community is, and so I really think that. Yeah. Hey, look, I'll put her in your sites and
reach out. Yeah.
I talk to her daily, so it's really easy for me to say, "Hey, would you be interested?"
It would be interesting because there's one scene where Mel's eyes change color, and it's when she's talking. It's when she's confronting her mom and telling her to stay away from Jace. Her eyes
they turn to red.
No, they're green. They turn to green.
Oh.
They're still gold in the middle ring, but they're on her close-ups. They're green. It's interesting. Anyway, yes, she sounds like she would be fascinating.
I know that sounds like the perfect.
Another thing she did on that same poster, there's a picture of Echo in his mask, in his firelight mask, in his getup, really, really tiny in the lower right-hand corner. She circled him and said, "He appears to be a villain, but isn't actually a villain, correct?" And I was like, you got it. You got to read on it. So she's just really astute, really observant. She's really, really great to talk to. Yeah. Her name's Jackie. I'll see if I can arrange something. Yeah. She's really great.
All right. That would be fantastic. All right. Thank you both very much for coming tonight. This was a fantastic discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I was very glad to be able to go deeper into this story than we did even after one, 5-hour stream. Here we are again. So I thank you very much. I knew that both of you would have incredible things to say about this and to go deeper in directions that maybe Brianna and Doug did not go. So thank you so much for being here. I have absolutely enjoyed it. I'll be live with everybody tomorrow on the Heath's Geek First channel at 9:30, but then also we'll be talking about something next Tuesday. I'm not exactly sure what. I got to go check my text messages and catch up on all of that. But we'll be here next Tuesday for Table Talk. Thank you very much, everybody.
Please like the stream, everyone.
Yes, do like the stream.
Yeah, like the
Subscribe
stream.
if you just found us.
On both channels.
Later, everybody.